Right, this is going to be another episode of Snake and Banter, the show of people who probably don't work ESL events to the playoffs or something. Not a shot at anyone really there, is it? Is it though? Because technically I chose not to. Never mind, let's leave that.
Yeah,
that's by the by. That's all right, cool. Well,
yeah,
nothing
totally.
awkward then. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So you're obviously a man of distinction and taste, just like me. So, I mean, technically, Aleksi also sort of chose not to be in the playoffs of Katowice. If you think about it on the most technical, legal level, he in a way chose not to. But he tried his best. That's the difference, Maui. Do we always try our best? That's maybe where we part ways a little bit there.
In a world of pure volition, he chose not to be there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you can always will it.
Yes, true. Right, Aleksi. Obviously, I will say at the beginning of this episode. Right, part of the reason why I did think it would be cool to have you on the show is obviously like you guys were out of Katowice early on, so it's like I knew you wouldn't be travelling home on some mad day. It is a tiny bit awkward that your ex-teams just won the event and like dominated everyone. That's going to seem a bit awkward, and obviously everyone's tuning in now like, does he trash talk G2? Like, spoiler, I don't think he's going to do that personally. Like, it wouldn't really benefit him at this point in time. Like, if you know CS pros, you just, like, even if it's sort of like the semi-fake ones I've seen over the years where they're just like, they do the tweet like, oh, congrats, bro, glad you won. But it's like behind the scenes, they hate each other. You have to sort of do that in public just to not have drama, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about the same thing. Just like, literally yesterday watching that, I was expecting them to win 3-0.
Oh, right.
Not losing a single map, and what it was like, I think they have a 20 win streak or
21, I think. I think they got to 21 maps, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? Like they're playing super good at the moment, so
yes.
Yeah, nothing to say about that.
Well, luckily, we always start with the guest's good point, and your good point is on this very topic, right? So let's start talking about what is your good point?
Yeah, I mean, my good point is just the G2 dominance and just the fact that, like, what I think's been happening, and also, yeah, I mean, you don't know all the details, obviously, but I mean, last year, the RMR happened when they failed to qualify for the major. And I think, like, knowing the Kovac cousins and, like, all of the players pretty much, except for Hooksy maybe, and I know JKS a little bit as well. But I just know that, like, for them, I think that was one of the biggest low points in their career. And, like, overall, I just know that any player won't like that situation, but for them, and I know for NiKo as well, especially, is like super important, right? And I just think, I mean, it goes to every team, right? Like every CS:GO team, like if you're at the top, that like you will try to bounce back and you will be twice as better, blah blah blah. But it's just like a lot of people doubted G2, a lot of people doubted Hooksy, and yeah, as I saw, I think Hooksy tweeted just a while ago, like, if he got benched then, I don't think no one would have bat an eye. But right now, it just feels like, I mean, it's crazy how well he's calling and how well they're playing over. So I just think it's amazing to me that they actually made a 180 and just completely turned the ship around and went to the global finals.
Obviously, they do have one player differently. Obviously, JKS wasn't there and Jax was when you were the and technically you had Ixta as the coach. So there are some differences. It's not exactly the same lineup, but even so, do they seem like a different team to the one you were leading?
Yes, I mean, I think the most obvious thing, I mean, if you really think about it, like Jax in the G2 I was playing in, I felt like he was playing like just now. Saying it after like thinking about the whole team and everything on paper is like when I joined the team and even after, I just think he was unfortunately playing the wrong spots and having the wrong role of what he should be doing. Like, he's a super explosive guy. I felt like I didn't use him that well in that regard as well. But for example, on CT side, he was like the main anchor on every map.
Yeah.
And I just think, like, if I would build a team that has Jax in it, he needs to be active on the CT side. Like, he needs to play positions where he's getting flashed, he's getting peaks, he's getting duels, right? Like, that's the whole. I feel like he's one of the best when he's able to do that. And I feel like on T side as well, he needs to be on the action. And I feel like the roles he had on T side, the roles he had on CT side was the complete opposite, right? And when you think about like JKS on paper, it's like the ideal fit. Like
Yes,
as soon as
perfect.
I saw that they got JKS and an in-game leader, I mean, although they started sloppy, like everyone thought that it was a wrong decision or whatever, but after a while and after they got the repetitions in, Monesi getting even more tournaments in under his belt as well. It's just like right now JKS is playing like unbelievable CS. It's like everybody's downloading his demo and checking like how can he play these stats even though he's playing like really hard roles. And yeah, I mean, I just think on paper right now they have the ideal squad. Like they have the Opper who is getting like some or who has good experience right now. They have the rifle duo that is, I mean, right now the best in the world, right? And then they have JKS doing the roles that he does best, and he's playing really good right now. So it's just like on paper, like an ideal EU team. Like when you watched FaZe, for example, when they were dominating, you could also argue that they had like the perfect player for each spot, right?
Yes. As in, like, he means last year, obviously, when they won the same event and Katowice and the other ones. Yeah,
exactly.
Good point. Yeah. Come on, Maui.
Right, yeah, okay. Role-wise, this team makes a lot of sense, for sure, because you have the guy that's just going to run in and feed himself, and that's Hooksy, and then you kind of have this guy that gets to be second in a lot of the time, and that's NiKo, and I think there's probably just a couple people you could put in the same air as NiKo for people that are just the best at trade fragging in the world. If NiKo knows where somebody is, they're dead. Like they're going to die unless they have an op holding him. So I think that's obviously something that goes that works well for them. For their dominance and that 21 map win streak. What I find most impressive is that it's a variety of win conditions for them, because I've noticed that it's not like they're not like Na'Vi. They're not like, they don't have to have Monesi fill the shoes of like a Simple and just dominate the server, just rotate everywhere, kill everybody. It feels like so many different people could step up, and I think that was really shown very well at Katowice, where during the group stage, JKS was doing incredibly well. You would have the occasional games from a handful of the cast too, and then in the playoffs, like Hunter was kind of the man for me. He was just so effective in the mid rounds. Anytime he became like a 3v4, 2v3, whatever, it felt like Hunter always had a way to claw things back. Even like a 2v5, he could claw it back. So he showed his value in that roster, or that position too. And so we barely even, I felt like for the playoffs, had to talk that much about NiKo, because even it was almost like the main thing for NiKo in what he was contributing to that playoff run was his storyline. The fact that he's been to so many finals and came up short so many times, because when you actually look at what happened in the server, it was a lot of JKS and a lot of Hunter, and yet at the world final, like at the world final, it was kind of like the Monesi show. And so you have all these different ways that they're able to come together. And I do think that Hooksy just really deserves so much credit in making this work, because when I was watching this, I feel like what happened, and like this is major speculation, but I think when they were choking, I think that the chain of command was probably not as well established as it is now. And I think that if I have to assume what happened in the months after they didn't qualify for the ARM or the major, I assume that they kind of like ironed out, okay, Hooksy's going to call the beginning of the round, and then he's going to listen to the input of everybody, and then he'll piece it together, but also Hunter will piece it together. Because I don't know, I just imagine right now, it seems like Hunter is contributing a lot in terms of what's going on in the mid-round for them, and so it seems like that has really been well established, and I think it was JKS. I think it might have been JKS that said it in an interview. Something about what Hunter provides in late rounds.
No, it was Hooksy. Sorry, I thought you meant the pistol round thing. Never mind. I thought you meant he was coming up with the pistol round strats.
Well, Hooksy did say that Hunter was coming up with the pistols, but I think someone else in a post-game interview or something like that said something that Hunter was doing so much of like holding their hand in just like play off of me or whatever, and like, we're gonna make this happen.
You, like he does it on CT side, and that's why I think the reason G2 CT sides are so like good right now, I think it's the combination of NiKo and Hunter. I think playing with Hunter, if you play the same side with him, like if you lose a round on practice, or you lose a couple rounds, or you lose a round on official, like he will not let it slide, you know? And that's why I really, really like thought that he was one of the best players I played with for sure, because of the fact that what I mean by not letting it slide is like he will try to immediately fix it whether it's in the official or in practice usually. And I've had a lot of teammates that are like not taking some things as serious as Hunter did, and I feel like that creates a lot of consistency, especially if you make enough repetitions, even on officials or practice. Like eventually, your CT sites or your like the setups you're running will be very good, and you just need to hit an off day, or you need to actually like have really good reads on them if you want to like you know, find a gap, or that you catch them fully off guard or something like that. But I just want to say that, like, jumping a bit previously on what you said, I think it's a bit funny, like, watching them and whatever, because like you can just clearly see like the amount of confidence they have right now. It's like so ridiculous. I feel like the body language is like well, how can I say? I just feel like after the tournament in Dubai, or even like when they were dominating on Dubai, like you could easily see it. But I can just feel like, you know, Hunter taking like you can see the body language he's having is just like full with confidence, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's so crazy to see, like, once this team hits the confidence peak, because like you were talking about choking, right? I'm not saying that like I wasn't a part of the reason like why we also choked some leads and whatever, right? Like we lost to Furia like 2 times on Ancient, for example, T sides and whatever. But like you can just see that once they like failed on RMR, right? I just think that they kind of went with this fuck it mentality to the Blast finals, even though they practiced a lot, I could imagine. But there was a huge... They had a lot of time, right? And most likely they took a week off, and then they started grinding, whatever.
I heard they did work
like...
behind the scenes, by the way. They didn't just sit during the whole major and all that. I heard they were actually one of the teams that got going and were doing stuff further, like you're saying.
Yeah, but all I'm just saying is I just feel like they went with this fuck it mentality, and you can just see that they are... Like, they're just, like, putting the, like, barrel down people's throats. It's like they're pushing lobby on Nuke CT. They're, like... doing everything at full confidence, and once the rifle guys can do that, and once JKS is doing stuff that he's doing, and like people try to abuse him or whatever, because like people are hitting his sides and he's just killing everyone, or on T side they're pushing the side and he's killing everyone. Like, what do you do after? And then like once you try to abuse Monesi, it's like he's just faster than you. It's just like with the confidence they have right now, it's just crazy. Like it's exactly like I remember playing against FaZe when they were really good. It's like every one of them were doing kind of the same thing. Like they have a lot of similarities, G2 and FaZe, I feel like. But right now you can just see that just the body language and everything they're doing is just full flowing on the confidence they're having.
Yeah, on this topic, because obviously the main thing is just like the dominance was the main point. Like, it is incredible. If people don't know, like, they did actually a half decent job on the broadcast of hitting the key points because they were following the streak, etc., which is what you should do. But I actually don't think that, like, if I were them, I know it's hard to plan these things, but especially because it was days off before the playoffs, I would have probably done some sort of like a mini content piece or something, because I don't think people understand how crazy the context is. Because unfortunately, right, when you talk about dominance, right, because we're talking now about statistical records though, guys, right? Remember, we say someone dominated, like technically FaZe dominated last year early on because they won all the tournaments. But if you ever watch the games, those were all like 16-13s and winning overtime, winning 3 maps, lose your map pick. Like, it wasn't dominant like in the server like early last year. No one was like, holy shit, we can't possibly play FaZe. It was more like, oh, they keep beating us by that much. This is like, not only does G2 usually, they don't just 2-0 people. One map, they'll just smash you like 16-7. That might be your map pick as well, by the way. So, like, that's already dominance out the ass already. Then you've got to add in, they not only had the 21 map streak, I don't think people know how insane that is, because this isn't like they played some Mickey Mouse Cop. They're playing motherfucking IEM Katowice. And remember, go look at their bracket. They ran into everyone. Every other tournament favourite that you would say would win instead of them. FaZe, Na'Vi. Like, they're just hitting them all of them. And they're just capping everyone like that. And remember, until the final, they're not dropping a map. Then the series angle, because people forget there was Blast in between. Guys, they're on like a fucking 12 series streak. And again, that's over 2 LANs and the Blast Springer. Like, they're hitting all the top teams here. They're doing a series streak against the best teams in the entire world. And remember, because in their team, all they had last year was like, you know, Mauisnake and NiKo were like up there. They're also running into all the top 5 players when they're playing these games. So in theory, on paper, they're not even supposed to always have the better player. But that's the thing. You have to come back with this lineup. Here's one thing that has aged very well, if you go watch all these podcasts back, as they were having that little dip in the middle with the RMR, is I never said, unlike everyone else, like, oh, yeah, I always knew this team would be shit. They can't. It's like, what are you talking? It's always the other way. I always used to think, like, how is this team not even, like, just at least good? You know what I mean? Like, on paper, to me, the worst case scenario ever when they got the JKS winning, because as you say, Aleksib, like, that was one of the most slam dunk moves of all time. He fit all the spots you needed that Jax wasn't that good at. And the joke is, those are the spots he wants to play. And so it's like I say, this is why this event I do think was like the absolute zenith thing. They won't be as good as this. Because the joke is the MVP of the tournament. This is like the fucking, when they run the major in FaZe with Rain being the MVP. It's like, bro, if like the 4th best player is the MVP of the whole tournament, your team is not already stacked as fuck. But how do you beat them if the 4th best player got, like, if JKS is the MVP of the whole tournament and you've got Hunter, like, the game over. Like, that's why I think, unfortunately, so much abuse went to Huxley, because the angle was like, why don't you win with these players? And I actually, one thing I want to ask you quickly about Aleksi is, I also always felt like with G2, the reason why Huxley from day one was being memed on and people were like, wow, he's not going to last long, is because I feel like people didn't give him like a fair start. They didn't say like, right, Huxley, your G2 starts now. It's like, because the team you were in didn't win Katowice in the mid. So I think people were just, it's just G2 fans were just tired of losing, you know. It's like they didn't give him the start. They wanted him to just pick up right where your team was and just win immediately. He was supposed to just win every tournament, I guess. Because if you actually go back and look now, it's only the fucking RMR guys. Literally, it's only the RMR with the other 2 BO1s they lost. So basically, except for that Game of Legion series, what have they done wrong? Like at Pro League, if you don't know, they lost to the eventual champions, Vitality, so that could already be a 2nd place. They lost at Blast Fall Finals to Heroic. Yeah, they lost to Liquid as well. By the way, Liquid's been probably the best upset team in the last fucking 4 months that doesn't win. Like, the joke is they either lose to the winner or a top 5 team, and that's it. They haven't even been bad. So I just feel like people, the weird one for me is like, I think people they did the same to you as well, to be fair. If you ever go look at your results, aside from the major, like, they're not bad results. Like, you're in finals or like making runs. Like, I think people, it's almost like that meme that G2 themselves always go on about, they never win a tournament in CS, they're always 0-3 in the finals. People have like too high expectations, I think, because this lineup, like, you have to give it a chance with how fucking amazing the players are.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it was a blessing for them, honestly. Maybe they agree with me, maybe they don't, but I think it was a blessing that they got that break of like just...
Oh, not going to the major.
Yeah, like not, because let's say they qualified for the major, right? Like, sure, they could have somehow got the engine running and just made the same results. I'm not saying they couldn't do that,
sure.
But I feel like first of all, I think like after that they made the overhaul with the coach change. They changed the manager and they went back to square one. And I think there, Huxley really got the chance to like start the team. Like, they didn't pick up a new coach. They continued with the analyst, and I know the analyst as well. It's like they continued with the same pack. They didn't change the players. This is where I feel like Huxley could implement whatever he wanted. They went back to square one. Maybe the players gave their input. Maybe he adapted. I don't know what happened, but to me, I felt like it was a blessing because they could actually start from square one, knowing, of course, it must have been a bummer that the coach left and whatever, and the manager left. But all I'm saying is that I think it was a blessing. Like, Huxley could start on square one. Mauisnake was not like, he was already like, by then Mauisnake had played like enough tournaments to understand like what's happening and whatever.
Yep.
And then also just the fact, like, on paper, just when I saw the roster change before they even played a match, I just knew that it is going to be better than the G2 we were, because of the fact that I just feel like the roles fit. Like, how can it not be better in a way? Like, we didn't win anything, right?
Yes.
So I just feel like they could at least do what we did with the players they had, and they should be doing more because of the fact that they actually got players that fit for their job, right?
Yes.
And I just think that that period they had like a full month of just like not thinking about CS and then bouncing back and starting from square one. It's just why they are here, I feel like.
Just got a couple more points that we'll move on. Obviously, we made this a big one because Aleksi had all the insights in the G2. A couple more things I would say about what I'm so impressed about how successful. I didn't hit the point myself there because I got lost in one of those side tangents. The point I was going to make was this. When I say stats like win 12 series at the biggest lands in the world in a row, win 21 maps, like... You have to understand, do your list in your mind now with the top 5 greatest teams ever. Spoiler, you can stop at number 1. The rest of them didn't do any of that shit. Like Team Liquid did. You probably weren't even in your top 5. They had the series streak, didn't have the map streak. NIP had the map streak, and no one gives a fuck. But you know what I mean? Like all those great Astralis lineups, Fnatic, like all those lineups that have all the majors, the Brazilians, none of them did this shit. As in, even when they're winning the majors, they couldn't do this. Like SK were back to back in majors. Don't worry, they lost series in between. Plenty of times they lost a map. You know, of course. In fact, in every major they lost a map. So I don't think people know how insane stats like that are, because I always say it's a classic line of mine. The ultimate sign of dominance is to 2-0 people, because that means you even get to pick your fucking map and I still beat you on it. Like at that point in time, like everyone like they are now, no one's hating on G2. You have to turn around and go like, tip my hat, you're just too fucking good. And then the other thing I'd say that I think's insane about that team as well is it has that same vibe the FaZe clan team did last year, which is a mega one if you're a fan of the team to watch, which is that except for if it was just Huxi 1vx, any other combo of players alive in a clutch, you're waiting to see if they win the clutch. Like, that's always the shit if you're a fan. Because, you know, in FaZe, it's like the joke is even Carragher could win some clutches. Like, normally in teams, like in a lot of teams, let's be real, I don't have to say which teams. I'll give you a random one. If I said Ents, right, the current Ents, there's certain players where if they're alive in 1v3, you're like, right, save or go next. Like, in this team, like... And pick any of the 4. If NiKo's alive, obviously game on. Honestly, he wins them all day long. Hunter is probably famous for winning 2vx's. And JKS, spoiler, like, this is the one area everyone missed on that whole, like, how could JKS ever replace Rain? Listen, Rain's an all-time great. JKS a better clutch player than Rain. Maybe Rain was a greater player in history. JKS especially, he's clutches, you idiots. That's what he was good at, like, 2015. His whole game, which is why they used to say in those other teams, but no one listens to interviews. You got to read between the lines of what people say in interviews, right? They would always say in those teams that he was in, Renegades, we left him till the end of the round because we knew he'll close the round out. That doesn't mean he goes like ego, like, I'm the guy who wins the clock. Everyone gives me that role. So I think I've heard this before from all the players, mate. I think in teams like Complexity, I think they just told JKS, you're like the fucking entry pack now. Now he's a fucking cool guy. He's not going to be like, hey, what the hell? Like, he's not the guy who does that. So that's why you also need, by the way, this is why I don't care what anyone thinks about Huxi. He can't be doing a bad job. It's impossible. Like any moron fan who goes like, oh, you just have all the best players. Bro, you can give all the best players to a bad IGL. I guarantee they'll never win anything. They'll fuck it up. They'll fuck up all the like the spots like we're talking about. They won't get even the personal dynamics. Like, look, I don't think I wouldn't have Huxi like best IGL in the world, but he must be doing a good job. He must be. If you see the way the team plays, even what Aleksi said about like you just see the body language has changed. The joke now is like they all believe. Even NiKo, and by the way, NiKo, the joke is he was at that, because he was probably still worried he'd lose the final. Even right up till the end, he was the only one that didn't crack. It was still like, oh, bloody hell, can still go wrong. Because his whole life's just been cursed when he's in those finals. But even he was fucking loving it. You could see it. So Huxi has to be doing a good job. I don't care what anyone says. Let's move on then, shall we? Right, Maui, what is your good point? Classic on brand one here again. So come on, let's get back into it.
Well, I felt like it was too obvious to just also go for G2 or something.
Yeah,
like,
of course. And we were going to have a massive segment on that at some point anyway, of course.
Right. So mine is just that I've been stoked for the progress that Complexity has shown at the beginning of this year. I really, I think myself and a handful of people were ready to sell out a little bit on this team. Maybe keep Grim, keep Floppy, change out a few of the players, maybe bring in a European IGL. But then what they did at the Blast groups and what they did at Katowice itself was really impressive. And I made this point before the HLTV rankings were released today, and yet they've shot up now to number 10 as of the time of this recording. Okay. And I think that's incredibly deserved, because you look at some of the teams that are right beneath them, and maybe you would think like Cloud9 maybe is like a better team than them or something like that, but like the results don't show that. You know, the results for Complexity have been great so far. They beat at Katowice, they beat Fnatic, they beat Maus and Ents, and I'm including the play-in of course here, and they took maps off of including Blast. They took maps off of Outsiders, Heroic, and Na'Vi. Like they're making these series incredibly competitive, and they could have definitely won the Outsiders and Na'Vi series. Like they were very close in both of those. They were up 14-8 against Na'Vi, map 3, and then Simple just decided he was going to go God mode at the Blast groups, and then he just destroyed them, and he just shot him out of the server pretty much. But I think that it's like finally this team recognized that if you grind the 10 hours a day, then you too can be one of the teams that is vying for a playoff spot, or can be an upset, have incredible upset potential. And I think that this kind of plays off of a point I made in an earlier episode, that Grim is performing well, but also like we saw Halzark looking really good at this event, that was kind of one of the last things I thought was really going to shoot up for me, because I thought Floppy could perform a little better. I thought Fang could recapture some form we saw a couple years ago, but for Halzark to look like one of the better operas at this event, I mean, now all of a sudden this team is really cooking, and you really can't. You're not gonna like instantly jump the gun on this and say like, yeah, they should start making playoffs, but they're not gonna be the laughing stock anymore of just getting an invite because they're a partner team. And I think that's where this roster has, at this point to me, found some success. That they're not just here because they purchased their way into that position. They've actually earned it.
Yeah, what do you think of complexity, Aleksi?
I mean, I'm just gonna say, like, you brought up Halzark at the end there. I just feel like he fully manhandled this tournament, and I wouldn't say the sole reason, but I feel like at least on the previous tournament, he was the biggest factor for me. I just feel like I don't understand. Like it felt like he was trolling or something when he's playing these resolutions and the default crosshair and whatever.
Yeah.
And then, but I don't know. Like the dude is filled with confidence, right? Like you can see if he plays these settings and whatever. Like if you saw the USP round he did on Inferno, it's crazy to me how he can even pull it off with the crosshair he's playing on. But he was playing super well, like amazingly well, right? And I feel like that really enables the others. I feel like in a way, like you watch your Oper like do all these weird things with his settings and whatever, and he's just fucking killing everyone, right? And I just feel like the others are just like they are for sure getting boosted by the fact that like holy shit, like this guy's playing well, right? And I just feel like I watched the tournament, right, when they like it was a while ago when they qualified for the playoffs, and they were super happy because they didn't qualify for playoffs in a long time, right? And now I just felt like, I don't remember what tournament it was. It was maybe like a couple months back or even more. But I feel like now when I watch them...
Oh, Pro League probably.
Yeah. Because I feel like now when I watch them, it's like a different phase where I could feel like people like still thought that, yeah, we like this might be like a free gift to go to a playoffs. But I just felt like they were, as you saw, like I thought they were winning the Na'Vi game. Like I think everyone thought.
Oh, they almost won 2-0, yeah.
It's like I remember what round it was, but someone clutched a round on the T side, and they reached like 13, 12, or 14. I don't remember what it was, but I was like, yeah, this is game over. And then like only Simple can do what happened on that game, I feel like. And yeah, I mean it's cool to see because I thought that they didn't really change that much. I think it's really nice to see like Grim. Like I feel like he's not limited, you know? Like I think he was pretty limited in Liquid. I don't know any insights on that, but I just know like he's playing way different. Like he's just pushing and he's seeking for duels, and that's what he should do because he's pretty crazy individually. But I feel like, yeah, it's just the fact that their individuals are really showing up, and I feel like they're picking up from that, and yeah, I mean they're playing really well.
Yes. By the way, that game that you're talking about, the one where they could have 2-0'd Na'Vi, and then they lost in like classic fashion also, like the third map where you just usually they let people down. That was even the game where if you saw Simple and Na'Vi's faces, they tried to do like the cool laugh, like, never in doubt, easy game. But it was really the one where you're like, like, you would like that close to get your ass beat, and then what you do is if you're just a better team, you pretend like, it was always going to work out. It's like, I can tell that the joke is it would have gone the other way if Na'Vi had lost that would be like Na'Vi would be kicking someone else. Like they looked like they were fucking at the brink. So the problem with this one is if the next tournament they bomb, they'll just be back on here. Like, they're not going to fly up. They're not quite there. So I'm not going to go too far this one, Maui. I'll give you this. I did think this tournament was way better because as you saw, if you saw that back and forth of me and Jason Lake, who was just sad when I just identified the pattern of like, well, now they're about to play a third map over past Jason. I think we know how this goes, which is on paper, they're supposed to win, but they will now find a way to lose. Obviously, winning against Fnatic was a big deal. The cool thing is this. If you actually look at the bracket of the lower bracket of this tournament, this is a question for fans out there. Do you think the major was legit? Do you think that the format is good and rewards all the good teams? Because if you're someone who was hating on FaZe and Vitality, you're like, look, the better teams would win, then you must think Complexity is amazing because they just did a fucking playoff bracket run at the major here. They beat Mouse, that team was in the semis. They beat Fnatic, that team was in the fucking quarterfinals. And then they almost beat Outsiders, who actually I think's even upgraded their lineup. And they're the major champions. Like,
they basically played the major.
The joke is, they just won the major. You fucking well, they almost won the major, exactly.
They
didn't, obviously. Yeah, it's just a low bracket of Katowice. We get all that. But if we're talking about pure level, like, you actually think those results were legit, then you have to give it up to this team. Look, obviously, I thought that was a bit of a scuffed major, and the format's a bit dodgy, and some of those teams were, it was like the best tournament there last 3 months. But at the same time, rankings are rankings, and they did beat top teams, which is what Cole didn't used to do. Before, the problem is this: they used to get, like we're saying, this close, and they almost beat you 2-0 and then got lost on third map, or they got a third map where it's like, it's 16-12, and then they were always the one on the 12 side or the 13 side, and everyone knows that who's watched them. So I'm still not over that, but hey, it's at the same time, just like that run of Mouse at Cologne, if people remember, a big run in a big tournament is still a big deal. Like, that can change everything. And crucially, these wins, it's when you have a million of those small losses, it gets in your own head eventually. So if you break through a few times, next time you actually think you can win for real. You're not waiting sort of like, who's going to fuck up now? Like, am I going to fuck up? The game's getting too close. I told you that was always my biggest problem, Maui's. I could always see in their faces when it was like 40-40, like, these motherfuckers aren't going to win this. So if that's gone, then brilliant. We can actually have some fun with the rest of the team, not just Grim.
Yeah, and one other point that's kind of more meta in this discussion is that actually with Liquid and Complexity both being North American teams that should probably start getting invited to tournaments, or if Complexity.
I mean, if they're 10th, by the way, you'll be in like Cologne, so if you can last till then, you'll because that's somebody the spot, so you'll just get an invite. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And what that does is that if people are talking about like what's going to reinvigorate North American CS, it's that when the Complexity type roster is already getting the invite, then actually the qualifier spot is going to go to like, the third best North American
Party
team.
Astronauts or something, yeah.
Yeah, and then that team can get more experience repeatedly because and then that they'll bring that experience back to North America, and then it just, continues the flow of, I guess, trickle down CS ability. That's
economics or whatever, invite-nomics or some qualifinomics. Yeah, we'll figure that out. We'll get Snappy on that one. He knows all about the trickle down qualifinomics, where you play 17 qualifiers to get a chance to play an online game at Blast, then not make it to the Blast 4 finals, which he does every year. He must love it. So he comes back every bloody year for the beating. So right. Now we're going to do my good point. And I've actually picked this one very carefully. And here's the thing, Aleksi. It's slightly awkward you're here because I'm going to sort of have to big up all dents that you were in. But you'll see my point of why. Which is, even though Heroic lost the final, and obviously that's something they've done a bunch in a lot of big tournaments now. They won the one where it was really close against FaZe, but they lost the major final. They lost now. They've been that close to winning lots of tournaments, right? Obviously, I pointed out a million times when they didn't make finals runs, like all the problems of the team. Like, I don't think some of their star players are quite good enough compared to the other star players. Like, almost everyone who's the top team in the final always has like the best player or the MVP on the other team. That's an angle. Cadian, I think, is maybe slightly overrated as an AWPer. He's still good. But the key thing is, the one thing I give Cadian more and more credit every month that goes by, it's a really good fucking IGL though. And the point I want to make here is, my good is that if you are a casual fan of CSGO, or just like a younger player, or you've never played at the top level, this is the team you want to watch to learn how tactics can work in your team. Because that's the thing, they don't have the G2 lineup. They don't have like fucking all-stars. Like, spoiler, at the end of this year, even if Heroic wins tournaments, I doubt they will have more than 2 people in the HLTV top 20. That's probably best case scenario as well. Like, they're not a team that's built with superstar, but I tell you why they're competitive, because fucking hell their T-side's good, and that style is so fucking you can see that these aren't all shit from spawn guys. They're clearly making like mid-round and especially late round calls. Like, they're so good at setting up and like going to the other side last second. Or you can even, the joke is, I watch their games and I can see the radar, and even I'm like, actually I can't tell where's this round going to end, actually where they're going to close, like, and because it must be like a call off, like a flash here, or someone spotted someone out of an apartment. So it tells me that like Like, the comms are fucking sick. Everyone's on the same page, by the way. As soon as they call some, like, rotation or mid-round, everyone fires off straight away. And, like, you see, like, for example, everyone knows that Nuke's amazing. How fucking good is this team at, like, switching up the site and then everyone's on the site all together with, oh, they're so good. So the thing is, like, a fan's going to go, but they lost and got beaten. But it's like, yeah, but look how they played, though. And the joke is they were almost made this 5 games by playing like this. Because what it shows you is one of the best things about Counter-Strike as a game, which is it isn't fucking football where the guy who's just better just scores 3 goals. Like, this is a sport where you can beat people who are better. It's like jiu-jitsu or something. The smaller guy can win if he just has better technique. It doesn't matter that they have all the other advantages. Like, this team not only did beat some really fucking good teams with better players, but they even when they lose, they match up so well against everyone. Because the final thing I want to say is this. I've noticed every version of this heroic core has an amazing map pool, and I'll tell you why. It's obvious. This is another team where it's not that they're good on every map. This style just works. This style and the way they play as a team works on every map, it seems. That's why they're always in these series. I'm just mad impressed. Like, even though they lost, that was a super impressive how they played. Thoughts, Aleksi?
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with the
fact. Oh, by the way,
I
forgot to say it, but that's the other team it reminded me of was your old Ents team. Because I always used to look at that lineup and go like, look, Sergey and Alan were good, but you're not fucking like NiKo and Simple. Like, and you guys were beating those teams.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like, I mean, T-sides, obviously them, like, if you give them a head start, I mean, sure, like, they had, for example, yesterday, they had, like, what, 8-1 or 8-2 lead on T-side Mirage. But it's usually when I've played against them and you give them a head start, it's really hard to claw back because of the fact that they have like a really deep strat book. Maybe it's not even the strat book, but maybe it's just the fact that you said that they're so on the same page, and that once you think you have a good read on them, they might have that one really tiny variation that suddenly they're switching it up to somewhere else, or they're doing like, let's say Inferno, they're doing the smokes on like the arch smoke and library smoke, but suddenly they're all jumping out apps. It's just like, it's really hard to claw back into the game. So I feel like if you see them struggling on the T side, it's because they're starting slow. But like usually they have really good T sides if they start well. But the CT side, I think that is something I've like not only in NIP, but I've also like heard other people like give credit to them, because you kind of feel like they're everywhere. It's like playing against Furia, but it's like it's different. Like Furia, you can have them like you have some rounds against them which last like 15 seconds because they just push you down. But I feel like Heroic is like they get a pick somewhere, and you played them so many times or you watched them so many times that you know that in 10 seconds. They will make a play at the other part of the map because one of the people who took the entry on the other side is running to the other side, and they're like throwing the utility perfectly that you can't really abuse the other side because it's blocked by util, and then they strike at you at the other part. Like that's the style they have, I feel like. But like going back to it, I just feel like the style is unique for sure, and I feel like on Ents, yes, we had a unique style. It wasn't exactly like, not at all how like Heroic is playing, for example, CT sides and whatever. I just think that the fundamentals and the fact that you said about like being on the same page and the communication, I think that's what made us strong. And I feel like Heroic has really good communication. And by the way, this team on paper as well is like the dream team again, because I feel like
as in they fit all
like
the roles.
They hit the jackpot with Shush, by the way. Like yes. I feel like this guy is like he's the anchor you want. Like he's the guy you want on the side who can do anything, and I mean you can rely on him, right?
Yes.
And the rifle duo they have and whatever is just overall like a really good team on paper, and they have the ideal spots, and they all want to play those spots as well. I don't think that they have any single player in the team who's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna switch all my roles to this. I feel like when they made that team, it just made sense.
With the comparison between your Ents and Heroic, I think it's more just like you're getting so much more mileage or so much more out of the parts than what you should necessarily, because like you look at some of the players and like, yeah, Stown could be probably a world-class player on a handful of teams, but like, I mean, Shush is just like, you know, he's like the Inters of this team. You know, he's just playing all the role, he's doing all the dirty work, but he's always doing it very well. But I love what you said about how like they're kind of everywhere all at once, because I think that's also how it would feel to play against them, because they're just constantly in the mid round doing something to make sure that they're like never on the back foot. That they're always making sure they're doing something, but they're way more tempered in their aggression than say Furia. Like Heroic aren't going to actually usually end the round within 20 seconds,
Yeah, exactly.
but they might end it within 50, because they're going to make like they'll do like a triple mid swing on Mirage or something like that, because they're like, okay, this one pick went our way, 5v4, but we want a little bit more info. Let's double swing from Cat and swing from window with a flash over Con or something like that. Like, oh, they'll just go all in on those plays, and they have that smoke towards apartments. And then that's why they kind of get beat by people that just do stuff that looks stupid. Like, I think wasn't there a round? No, maybe it was actually Yabby that did this actually, but like I remember in the grand final, someone walked through a smoke towards B apartments and just nailed him in the back, because it's like if you like test their utility all the time, they might not always be holding it because they're setting something else up. It's kind of like the way, let's say, like the way that Gambit / Cloud9 gamble on the CT side is they'll just gamble stack a bomb site, and you're just like, why the hell do you have 4 people here? But with Heroic, it's like they'll gamble push in the mid round, and they'll leave one guy by his lonesome at the other bomb site, but because he has a smoke, they're comfortable doing this little play. So yeah, Heroic are like, I mean, they're just so fun to watch because of that. Like, that's why it's just constantly entertaining Counter-Strike. And that's why when this grand final was set up between G2 and Heroic, it was like the best team CS versus a team that's playing incredible team CS, but has insane individuals on top of that. And that's why, I mean, I think that's the reductive narrative for why G2 came out on top too.
Yeah, I feel like the comparison with Furia was pretty bad, but I just wanted to make the...
You meant because they push a lot and it's early.
Yeah, just the fact that like, if you think about any other team on CT side, you know the style they play.
Yes.
But I feel like Furia, Heroic, and maybe arguably Big, and the argument with Big is just the fact that they do so much calculated stuff and they work with utility a lot. Like, I'm not sure if you saw like some of the nades like Crimbo was doing on Anubis, for example, and all these things. Is like they're trying to find the smallest details, right? But those are the 3 teams when I think about CT sides. It's like you kind of they have a different style compared to everyone else. I feel like all the other teams are playing like kind of basic, but they're trying to make the fundamentals so good that it actually works, you know. But they have like a different approach, kind of.
Yes. A couple of things to quickly say there. One, I definitely agree on the Shush point. Like, the funny thing is, if you go through the names, obviously every fan's going to be like, how did Astralis not get down? And it's like, to be fair, Astralis has like Blame F, who's a very good rifler. You know, they've had some very good players. The player they missed was Shush. Yeah. That should have been, that to me, that was so obvious that was the Zipnik's replacement. That is literally the player who's going to do all the shit that old Zipniks did and be like the secret sort of like foundation of the team. Because again, also, by the way, you saw in this tournament, still every time you're in a big game, just runs out on like Mirage and just does some 2 mental like entries. Like, oh, the site's just open. Like, that's not even supposed to be a big name player, guys. Like, again, it's just a team where they get everything. And then I definitely agree on the players aspect. If people remember back in the day, I always used to make fun of DDK, the famous colour commentator for Face It and that, because one of his main things he never shut the fuck up about, but no one was listening when he said it, is he always used to spam that phrase, information play, didn't he? But what Dan was trying to explain is Dan always cared about meta game concepts, and what he understood, which is accurate, because if people don't know, he played a lot of team FPS games himself, is when you're behind and you're at an information deficit, which the CTs are at the beginning of a round, with they don't know where the Ts are, right? You don't just sit there and let yourself get picked off, because eventually it actually gets harder and harder and harder and harder to know what's happening. Like, you're surrounded, or they have a flank on you, or they have something. What you do is, when you're in the middle part of the game, you want to make a play somewhere just to get more information. Like, even if you push and there's no one there, like process of elimination, right? They might be stacking over here, or they can't be a flank. Like, the Heroic's probably the best at that. They don't just sit there at like 1 minute into the round and go, which side are they going to hit? Oh, fucking hell, I hope it's not mine. They make a play somewhere and they have a sense of what you're going to do. And it's like, you, as a result as well, by the way, you can't just do like one of those massive slow setups. Like, they're going to have a fight at some point in time. They're going to make you actually do something before you can call the time. And it's not like those teams that sit there on Inferno and just wait till 40 seconds to see if you're running the site through the smoke. Like, they definitely got, I like the active style. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it, I think.
But I think it's pretty underrated as well. Like, if you think about Heroic as a team, like, just the last detail about this, it's just the fact that I don't see a single player that's bad with utility. Like, I honestly, just to say, like, I didn't watch too much Yabi. I don't really... Like, I know that he has a high headshot percentage, and I feel like he's getting into good situation when he has an angle on with an AK. He's like fully confident in it. But I feel like they play so good with util. Like, I've actually watched some of their games, downloaded their demos and whatever, and just watching the micro stuff. And I feel like their individuals are like dropping util for each other in a really fluid way, where I don't think like Kadian is doing or like who is responsible of some of their stuff.
It's like a team effort, right?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's just like when they switch. So let's say you said something about like them making a switch on mid game or whatever. Like they're running and meanwhile dropping util for the guys that make sense is to throw the util. And it's like when you watch a lot of other teams, it's like on these moments there is a lot of situations when you might be lacking an entry flash, you might be lacking like one of the good smokes and whatever. And I feel like they do it really well on the fly. And that's also why I think it enables them to play that good, because once they do a mid-game call and they need to do these split-second decisions, I just feel like they also jiggle around with the util so well that it just makes it so much more smoother, right?
Yes.
I actually looked at the flash stats for Mauisnake, because I noticed in the grand finals he dropped off, and I felt like every time he was in a situation, like a lot of times he was playing against Heroic, he was getting flashed off. And I looked at basically prior to the grand finals, Mauisnake per round was flashed for 1.5 seconds, but against Heroic he was flashed for like 2.5 seconds per round.
That's an almost.
So it's like they are so good at making an opper just feel like their screen is white all the time. Like their game plans are so good, and you actually look back at a lot of the teams that they played against, and it's not like against Simple. Like Simple had beneath a 1.0 rating. Yep. The game against ZywOo, it was like ZywOo's worst game of the tournament. That's also due to air quality, but that's another topic entirely. But no, but then also when he played against Dexter didn't like do that well. Like basically when you're an opper playing against Heroic, their util is so good that it does stuff you a lot of the time.
Sure. I mean, I actually used to have that line about the old Ents team that Aleksi had. I said the reason why that team can win Counter-Strike matches is because, one, it doesn't matter how good your aim is. If you're blind, you can't shoot people. And then two, if on CT side, you can make a 2v1 setup, you can be NiKo. When you kill the first guy, my second guy kills you. Like, those two principles will work forever in Counter-Strike. Hence why, to bring it back, if you're a young fan who doesn't know the game, that's the team to watch. Don't try watching this G2 team or FaZe. You won't be able to do any of that shit. This is the team to watch. Right, so okay, Aleksi, what was your bad point?
My bad point was, I mean, there could be a lot of different ones, but I'm going with like outsiders right now. No, don't mean that they're bad or anything, but just like the reason that they're not making good like deep runs, and maybe just giving some insight, like just from my perspective as a player and whatever. So like,
for context, his team did get eliminated by them at Katowice. He did play them in the actual, like, obviously just played the brand new lineup with Chiron. So out of everyone, he's not even just going off the major stuff here. So come on.
Yes, but like the thing with outsiders is that once they made that major win, I feel it happened in my team, but I'm 100% sure that it happened in a lot of teams. Is that people are looking what they're doing.
Okay.
And
studying the get demos, you mean, as an outsider.
And I could see my players as well, like watching some of the POV of the different individuals in that team, because they had some maps on the major that they were really good at. And I feel like not only do teams like give more respect, but understand the way they play the game, but I think that they made such a good, just the way they played the major. Like I feel like there were so many rounds when they're saving on T side, or when they're saving guns on CT side and then clawing back around they shouldn't win, because like they're enabling James to be annoying with the AWP and no one is feeding because they're all playing as a group, like no one is trying to do anything. Like they fully trusted the system and that's why they won. But honestly, like after that, like the teams and the players, I think they got a really good understanding on how they play, and I think Like, it's not only players that I know, but I think a lot of people like watched how they played and actually understood the style they play. So it obviously makes it hard if they are not adapting. And just the fact that, I mean, they made a roster change, which I don't know nothing about. Like, I don't know why they did it. I don't, like, they know better, right? Like, obviously there must have been a reason, because you just won the major. Like, there must have been a reason, right? So I just feel like, yes, it is hard to implement. Like, it is super hard to for Chiron to get into this team and play the kind of CS that I don't think he's ever played. So it takes time. But yeah, just the fact that, like, I mean, they're not making deep runs right now. They did beat us. We had one good map against them. But just the fact that I think it is difficult, and they need some time, and they need a lot of repetitions to make it work again in similar fashion. But I think just the fact that obviously they're playing with a new player, and the fact that people are actually studying them or studied them twice as hard, especially the top teams, because they have all the time in the world to, like, after you get dropped in the major and whatever, and you're just watching this team win it, and you're thinking, like, how the fuck did this happen? And you're studying them, like, you will learn a lot, and you will know their tendencies. And that's when it becomes hard if they don't. I'm not saying they didn't adapt, but you could see that they're trying to play the same kind of style. And I feel like a lot of it is because of the fact that people understood how they actually approach it.
Okay.
I will comment first on the swap they made. I mean, I think none of us were really convinced by Northates, to be fair.
Even so, if I was Norbert, I'd be like, 22 tournaments, I won the world championship. Can I stay, please? No, get the fuck out.
I think I was a Nor believer for all of, like, 30 minutes, you know, but then like reality set in, and I think he was pretty much unanimously the weakest player, even though statistically speaking, obviously Kickert's doing worse, but he just has all the shittiest roles. Yeah. So with the Chiron change, what's worrying about Outsiders in their future is that you kind of now have three riflers that really want to do the same thing, because Flit, Fame, and Chiron are all what I would consider sort of aggressive riflers. Chiron's more on the Kinder scale. He's like that side of it, whereas Flit and Fame probably like to wait a little bit more, but they still are pretty early brawlers. And so with this roster, like they put Chiron into a couple spots where he was essentially just supposed to be an anchor, and it's kind of like you're taking away a lot of what he's good at, which is just like running out and headshotting people. Like you were mentioning Jax earlier. Like this is kind of what, like, Chiron's like Yakinder, he's like Jax, he just wants to fly at people, and he wants to just run at them and aim duel them with any supportive utility. And so I think it's gonna take a while for Chiron to really get it, because when the round slows down, that's like the last thing Outsiders do. Like they do not just start sprinting out. They don't just check for info. Like they'll make a read, they'll set to their plan, and they'll wait for the opponents to make a mistake so frequently. So I guess like with the overall point with Outsiders, I just don't really see them. I see them being this team that's kind of like a gatekeeper more than like a championship contender. That's where I think their trajectory is for me.
Okay. I mean, I've made it pretty clear on the Hot Take Point Made show, which is, you can see it on this same channel. If you want to see the last episode we did, it was last week. We'll probably have another one coming this week. I made the point clearly, like, I do think, here's the problem. It wasn't like a fluke that they won the major, in the sense, if you actually look who they played in the playoffs, because they had that weird bracket, like, they actually should beat those teams, in my opinion. Like, they were the better team, and their style was a better style, all the rest of it. But the fluke was just getting that playoff draw. Like, how the fuck do you get Fnatic and a Mouse into Heroic to win a major? Like, the point is, like, there's a lot of great teams in history might have won a major if that was the fucking playoff bracket. Like, remember the one he made the major final? He had to beat Team Liquid into Na'Vi, and that would have been like the greatest team of all time as trials in the final. Like, a bit harder, a little bit of a harder task there. So my problem with them was they were always going to be like a gimmick champion, because they can't be number one. Like, the Chiron move in that sense is interesting. Like, maybe if he does come and show his skills, like, all of a sudden there is a lot of fucking skill in the lineup. Like, suddenly it's like a good set of players. But my problem is still the James Calling style. Like, I know it sounds like a hater move, but you were there, Maui. I was there during Flashpoint 2 the whole time, even the Vanguard. I always said on these shows, it's, even though it sound fucked up, when I watch James play, and obviously I'm in the observer, but I can see everything, it was always mad to me how many teams just play into his hands, and like when he's saving the AWP, just give him those free kills. We're like, rush the AWP. It's like, don't rush the AWP if it's overpass and James saving in the fucking bank area. He's going to be at a close off angle. He's going to hit that first shot every time. You just feed his gun at that point in time. He gets the kills. He never loses the AWP. Like, the joke is those are the edges where they grind you down. But the problem I get is every other team doesn't play that way. So if you're a coach or an IGL, when they're not the top team, remember, before they won the major, they were probably on most people's radar, like what, the 9th best team, the 10th best. There might even have been bigger name, like, you know, big players at Cloud9 that people thought were better over. Like, I don't think people put mad hours into this team. So the problem is, you almost have to coach your players to play a totally different style. And don't do the opposite of what your instincts would be. Like, if people don't understand, there are actually loads of scenarios in Pro CS where people don't bum rush the AWP when he's saving. And you're like, dude, all you're going to lose is an AK. Like, the $300 doesn't matter to him. And if you get the AWP, the round's over. Like, you win the whole game off this, but teams don't. So the sad thing is, like, to me, they were always destined, if they went too high, to get exposed a little bit. And as you said, they're not bad. Like, they could still be a good team. But the problem is they were always at their best when they were just outside sort of like where you were, the teams you were focusing on. Because then they do have the weird map pool, and then they do have this weird style. And then in this case, they had new players no one knew. Like, who the fuck knew this Flame guy would be any good? Like, no one. Like, no one had any expectations for these players. So, to me, like, essentially, it was always going to run out. But they can still be a good team. And obviously, I'm still interested on the whole roster move angle. And obviously the joke here is, if you want to bring it all back to the beginning, like, Aleksi's angle is obviously like, look, if they can beat me and an IP, why can't you just win the whole tournament then? He's probably the best team in the fucking world or something. Like, come on. Me? I was in a major final, whatever.
Yeah, I think the fact, wait, I'm blacking out here, but I think like what you said about outsiders being like just like when you're focusing on the other teams, like that's when outsiders strike you.
Yes.
I think that's like a really good way to put it, in my opinion, because it is kind of like that, or at least that's kind of how it felt previously before they even won the major, right? And I just feel like after the major they got that respect, and a lot of teams like took them, I guess, just as like a contender for a title. Maybe right now they fell off a little, and they just like, I don't know, need to play with Chiron for a while now. But I think that was one of the things with ENCE as well, at the start at least. Like, no one focused on us. I don't think anyone focused on us, honestly. Sure, like, there's just not like 5 Finnish players. Like, what can they do?
Yep.
But like in the end, we got some respect, and we had some good tournaments here and there. But I think the same thing happened, like in terms of at least the time that I was there after the major. Like that we came into the radar, and that's when things start to get harder. That's when you actually need to show, like, are you able to adapt? Like, what can you come up with, and so on.
Right, Maui, what is your bad point?
Mine is that we're just starting to see FaZe's floor, and I think that it's a bit lower than anybody would have wanted to admit. And so
you mean in terms of placing?
Yeah, in terms of placing,
okay.
Because you think that if they just kind of kept up even the form that they had, say, at the Blast Fall Finals and World Finals,
sure,
that they would have done better than this.
Yes.
So we're starting to see that floor, and I think like part of it you could definitely blame on the fact that they didn't have the ideal practice circumstances, where Rain had a kid, he didn't play
sure,
the Blast Spring groups. And then they came into this with probably pretty little practice, but I know it wasn't no practice, because I do know that when they were at the Blast Spring groups, they were actually practicing with Rain, but Esatag was watching Rain's POV. Whether it was like he was, okay, I think he was like in the coach slot or something like that. So he was watching what Rain was doing so that he could kind of imitate what Rain does on these maps. And so like they were practicing a little bit, but basically what I'm getting at here with their floor is that I think that their style, which was so good at weirdly, you know, eking out these wins over the first half of 2022, has proven to be a little bit more inconsistent. And that's kind of mostly due to the fact that FaZe in man-up situations have a really strong knack for just like throwing man advantage leads in rounds. Like, they've lost, like the Liquid lost to on Overpass, for example. I remember pretty vividly at this event, or at Katowice, I mean, because they had like a 5 versus 3, and then Rops peaked by himself, and then I think Twist fought by himself, and then Kerrigan was low, so he had to back up, and then it was like a 3-on-3, even though it was like for Liquid, and then Liquid were able to close it out, and then Liquid ran away with the whole half, and it was just moments like that where just you could see that the comms are not always up to snuff. And this was actually something I definitely noticed this when they were winning games too, but they would usually just kill people. Like that was the big difference, where it's like the form of the individuals was so high that they could make like bad peaks, like untradeable peaks, but they would just win the duel, and you'd probably feel like, oh god, like FaZe are owning us, they'll just peek anything at any time. And that was actually propelling them to probably win some rounds that they weren't necessarily supposed to win. But at the same, it's double-edged sword. Like if you peek in an untradeable way, then sure, you'll win a fight that furthers your advantage, but at the same time, it's a great way to throw a round too. And I think FaZe are kind of just getting the bad end of that right now, that if the players just don't all show up individually speaking, that they can lose to a Liquid, that they don't even make playoffs, that they can really fall apart, like on the second map there versus G2, like that. Like we all were really like that first map between G2 and FaZe was probably one of the sickest maps of the entire tournament.
Really good.
But then the second map was like just so
smashed.
bad. It was really bad. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, we're just seeing FaZe's floor, and I don't like it.
Okay, where you at on FaZe, Aleksib?
I mean, I just think that they are that kind of team to me, that it's the hard-hitting team of the CT sides. Like, it was really unreal what they could pull off. Like when they were playing really good. Like I feel like when you went to Twist, he's killing 3. When you went to Robs, he's killing 3. It's like their CT sides made them so strong. And I feel like, yeah, on that G2 game, for example, I just think those two, like, the one who's winning the first map is carrying like a lot of the momentum on the second one. So I think like if FaZe could have like clawed the 16-14 win, maybe it was a different story on the second map. I just think like they just like G2 just looked smashing on the second, like had no chance, right? But yes. I feel like, I mean, it is interesting that you said it, because I completely even forgot about it, that like Rain wasn't playing, and I didn't even realize like they were still practicing with him and whatever. But I feel like, I think it's a combination of a lot of things, and I think this happened to me a lot, that we're like in teams, that once everything is not like perfect, or the individuals is not like feeling like their best or whatever, like this starts to happen, like you are throwing 5v4s or 5v3s, and it's just the overall cohesion that what usually happens, or the fact that when this guy is taking a solo duel at this point, like he's winning it, and after you win one match doing that, they just snowball the whole tournament because of like their individuals getting more and more confident, right? But I feel like right now it just happened that exactly what you said, that they were sloppy in some of these rounds. And then you could also see it, like I felt like when I watched their game, like their body language, for example, like it was completely different. Like they were starting to feel like the team that once they were down and they won a round, like you didn't feel like they won the round, kinda. And I feel like when they were on this, like a streak or whatever, like fully dominating, you could just see that, like no matter the situation, they're like fully believing it and whatever. So I just think like they're on this period right now, where I feel like as well that if they've had some time off now, and they've reconsidered some stuff, and I think they're getting some good quality practice in, that we will see a different kind of phase in the Pro League. And if not there, I think that like they'll bounce back at some point, because just I feel like that's just the way it is. And I don't think they've ever, like if they had played bad, like I usually think this team is bouncing back pretty quickly. But you never know, like what's going behind the scenes, or are they able to practice a lot now? Like what's happening? I don't know anything about that, but I just, from what I remember this team always and what Kerrigan is able to do, I just feel like, I mean, they're gonna bounce back eventually, but are they gonna do it next tournament? I think that they will do a lot better because of the fact that they have some time here, but who knows?
Yeah, I've got a couple of points on this one. One is that actually, here's what's mad. So I brought up these stats while you were talking. if you just look at the last 3 months on LAN, I'll just read you the rating of the 5 players, right? So Twists is 1.16 rating, Rops is 1.16, Brokey is 1.14, Rain is 1.09, and Carrigan's 0.92. Now, here's what's crazy about that. That could just be the stat line from when they were winning every single tournament. Like, the joke is actually, like, the team's still really good. Like, all those players, generally, those are the numbers you'd want to have. And in theory, that should yield, you'd hope, like another final or two, maybe a title. But the problem they have is, the difference is, if you remember, like I said, even when they used to dominate and win all the tournaments last year, they would still win so many close games. The Jokers back then, it was like if around was a coin flip, they always got their side. It was heads every fucking time. They just picked it. And they would win impossible games. So to me, that also can't continue forever, all the time. Like, no one's that lucky. No one has everything go their way. No one has everyone feel the same level of confidence. Also, think about the insane level of confidence you have when you get like 10 out of 11 fucking clutch rounds, or you win like 5 1v3s in a game, and different players win. Like, everyone's just going to be buzzing. At that point in time, the joke is, if you're the player who hasn't done it, you're like, fuck, I'm going to get in there. Like, we can't lose this game, basically. Like, I can go for this PK, like you say, because if I die, Rops is in the site, he just cleans up with a 3k. Like, it changes totally your decision making. So to me, they're not that far off. Like, they're still right there. It's just the problem is, as you say, Aleksi, they never do get, like, the difference is before they'd have stolen that first map against G2, and then maybe the second one's interesting. But because they lost it, that opened the door for them to just get rocked on it. Then another problem they have is this. If you remember in their peak, one of their best maps, probably their best was Nuke. They're still good on it. It's just every tournament they won run into G2, and G2 is the daddy on Nuke now. That's the difference. Before, they would like go, oh, Nuke is our home. No, Daddy's home. Like, G2 was unbeatable on Nuke right now. You can't do shit against them. So that's another problem right then. Because there's another thing. They do every tournament run smack bang into G2. Like, I want to see a tournament where they just meet in the final. Like, they go separately. You know, like, maybe they get the Liquid Heroics. We can still give them teams that can beat them, and we'll see how good they are. But if you get one tournament live taken every time by G2, which everyone does right now, it's going to be a lot harder to get some finals, guys. I'll still say, obviously, the Liquid one, a little bit disappointing. But even then, it was another close series that you lost. Just the margins. Someone has a good round. So to me, they're not that far off. The problem is this, right? I would say, to me, they're the obvious team to, like, battle G2. It's just that directly at the moment that seems like a counter. Like, actually, G2 just beats them every time. So maybe they're the team who has to get the other bracket, and then we'll see them in some finals, and we'll see if they can win. Or if someone like a Heroic can upset G2, then maybe in can come FaZe Clan, and we can have another banger final. Because I'm not out on them yet. I can't be, because the problem is, like, that's why I was actually really curious when you said they're, like, flaw. I was like, it's still pretty good. But I get what you mean. Like, they would always have made the playoffs before. Like, that Liquid one was a little bit off the pace, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly just, this is their floor, in my eyes. I'm not saying it's a down, the trajectory at worst would be flatlining at this point. I don't think it's going to get any worse than this. And even if you're performing at this level, like, if they just had any different type of bracket run, they would have made playoffs.
Probably,
like,
yes.
Yeah, so
they did also. There's another thing, by the way. It's also points for the G2 one. That group here was fucking insane. Oh, yeah. I know. Like, here's the thing. I'm not flaming ESL. I actually think if you ever look into it, ESL does their rankings quite well. Not the actual ESL rankings, but I mean, as in they take the real seeds, guys. And the point is, if you look at Group B, the names aren't as big, but those are all teams that made the play. Like you said, the major runs, they all have inflated rankings. So it's just one of those times where you just get a fluke where it's like you do like one here, two here, but it just happens that the second group's way weaker, because that fucking group here was insane, mate.
Yeah.
It was insane, wasn't it? All right, go on then.
Yeah, I mean, it could have just had 4 teams that all were their own playoff bracket. It was basically a playoff for most tournaments.
Obviously. Oh, it was mental, wasn't it? I know.
Yeah.
Do you have any final take on the FaZe thing? Should we flip to the next point, Aleksi?
Oh, not really, honestly. All
right, let's do it. Right, so the last one on this section of the bad points, and I've purposely picked this one, because this will sound mad. This is where Mauisnake, I almost understand why people think I'm a hater now. Because it's like, even in the moment, like, it's my style. In the moment when you have your success, I just come in like, you'll never be good at that, though. It's like, oh, what the fuck? I've succeeded. So it's going to sound like such haterism, but I'm just going to say it. It's a topic you'll know I've thought for a long time. Liquid is just permanently one piece away. Because like I said, dude, if you actually think now, mate, aren't they like one of the best upset teams, along with outsiders, we've had for the last 4 or 5 months? Like, the amount of times they've gone further than you expect. They've beaten the big teams. They've beaten the fucking the G2s, the FaZes, the Navis. They've beaten all the big teams. They get all the wins, but never yields a trophy. And part of the reason why is, It's like the joke is they just can't. It can't last long enough. Like the Cinderella story always ends before like when midnight strikes. Like what happens is they get as far as they can go, big semi final. They get all the way there, and then one player just. Notice I don't even pick one player now. I'm not even just making this the OC thing. I still think it's bang average. Like it's just always one person's off, and so the reason that's infuriating to me is, mate, if you could just fix that one piece, we can start talking about everything. You can win the major. You can fucking be the best team in the world. They're not that far off.
Liquid are. I wrote a tweet like when they got knocked out. It just feels actually like they're closer to just bombing some of these than actually winning a championship, even though they're going so deep so consistently. It's like when they play the real championship contenders, you just see the flaws so much more obviously. But like I actually think what's cool about Liquid is that actually on the flip side, their floor is kind of high. Like they actually are not really doing that badly in anything that they're playing in. They didn't do very well at the Blast groups, but it's kind of like they were trying. They were just implementing the 7 map pool, which in turn meant that they were down a map every single series that they played. So it didn't look like it worked right then. But then they actually who'd they play on? Didn't they beat Spirit on or who'd they beat on Nuke? They beat.
Yeah, they beat them on Nuke.
They beat Spirit.
They never used to play that map. Obviously, it was the perma for a long time.
Yeah, so they're trying new things out, and it feels like what they're trying to do is like ramp up in a way that's like looking outside of the roster move. Because I agree. If they just made one replacement, this team would be amazing. If they got Dexter for OC, actually, if they got Frozen for Elige right now with his form, like there's a couple things that they could do. But actually, what they're looking for is actually pretty pragmatic. To actually just like say, let's expand to a 7 map pool, try to win the veto everywhere we can. They're now giving themselves the best opportunity to win. And I think if they didn't, if they like that veto versus FaZe was about as good as it possibly could have went for them. Like they were able to get like all 3 of those maps they could have won. Like I was actually convinced when I started watching that one. I think I said on the desk, I said they could win all 3 of these. So even if they lose map 1, you don't want to count Liquid out of this series just yet. And that's what's kind of cool about what's going on with them right now. It's just that you just look at this. I guess you could look at the individuals, and you don't really necessarily know like who's your big 3. Like Naf has come into a form of his own where he's always going to give you something every single series. Like his consistency is remarkable at this point. But then the other 3 people that are supposed to be helping you out in Yakinder, Elige, and OC. Yakinder's role is just high variance in general. OC is just some games he pops off, some games he doesn't, and like that's just what you're getting with him now. And Elige, like he's probably, in my eyes, he's the guy that needs to come into the form that we know him for, because he should be the guy that's like the consistent number 1, not even number 2 to Naf. He should be number 1, Naf should be number 2, and then you're playing a roulette between like the weird Nitro pop-off, which happens once every 7 maps, it seems like, and then Yakindar, who should be doing well more often, and then OC, who actually is like 1 out of 3 maps he's doing well. So like that's how it works for me right now. And I think that if Elige finds the form that he's supposed to have, then this team can win championships. But Elige, it just seems weirdly far away off from what I know him for.
What do you think, Aleksi?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like I feel like the insights you gave, or both of you, is just like I mean the overall view, I guess, for a lot of people. I don't think there's a lot of people who argue otherwise. I just think the fact that like it was nice how you said it. Like their floor is kind of high. Like at least now it's been for a while now after Yakindar joined. So I just feel like you don't see them getting bombed out from a best of 3. Like maybe if they lose narrowly on the first map, a team like G2 can just like win you 16-6 on the second one. But I feel like against all the teams, you usually see them winning a map, and you usually see them playing a tight series, even though they would be losing or not be playing their best. I just feel like the Oper in the team, like nothing about OC or anything. I'm just thinking like with the style they play and whatever, like it's just thinking like if they would have an Oper who is like way more aggressive, like what would happen? Like, is it possible because of the fact that Yakindar is playing like this, as you said, like high variance, like taking a lot of room, whatever? And I feel like, I honestly don't know, because like when OC is having that game, right, and when they're like that style, when they execute it well, kinda, you just feel like they're playing fundamental CS, and it looks really nice when you watch it, and like the execute they made happen, just like no chance you're holding that if you're playing on CT. It's just like when it actually clicks, it's really nice to watch. So I don't honestly know like what point to make. Like if they can make it consistent, it's obviously gonna be really good. But I guess it's what you said. Like the other individuals needs to show up and like in order to make it work, right? So
Sure.
I can't give like another thing.
It's all good. One thing I would say on that is like I do think it was funny when they did that blast segment where they were like, what do you think of Nitro? And they asked all those teams and IGLs and coaches, and they all started like this. By the way, perfect. Everyone who did this, you inadvertently did what I've told you to do your whole careers. You all started like, love him, great guy. He's had a lot of success. I think he's a good in-game leader. And then you kept going. It's like, yeah, where's the bot coming? Like, oh, I think he's good. I think you should keep him. He's doing a good job for like, blah, 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 blah. And then we came to bot like, yeah, I'd say easy to read. Put him in the easy, very comfortable for us. Like, it's like, fucking hell, dude. Everyone said that. So my problem is I do think that's an issue as well, which is it logically makes sense if you have players who are up and down in form in the team and you don't know who to rely on. I always say, as fucked up as it sounds, the reason why a team with a super duper one-man carry is good is because it makes the job so much more streamlined if you're the coach or the in-game leader. You're like, right, I know exactly what I'm going to get from him. Now let's worry about these guys here. How do we make these two players work or this spot? If you don't know in this game, is my AWP going to be good or not? Is he going to miss every shot or is he going to actually win out in the duels? Is my entry player going to get all these entries and we're 5v4 or is he going to just run into a brick wall and die and we're down 4v5? If I don't know these things, it's going to be really hard to make my calling style like this heroic style. We're talking about all super fucking unique and we're all through. You're just going to try a lot of simple things and see what works and then just figure it out as you go. So I do think it limits the team a little bit that they have these, but I think it plays into the style. And then the other thing is, even though he didn't do it, low key, when he said there, Maui, when he was just like, your insight, because he was doing that Finnish thing where you're like slower with like saying the sentence. When you were like, both of your insights, I was really hoping, like, I know it sounds perverse, but I really hoped he was going to be like, I'm so amateurish and you just know nothing about I saw low key. I know. I really hoped he was gonna like flame us, and he had some like secret shit that we didn't know. Like they were doing really well, and we just looked like because here's the thing. I would just leave it in. I don't give a fuck, guys. I think it'd be hilarious. So luckily he didn't. He whatever. He picked us up at the end. It's all good. Because all I'll say is this, Mauisnake. Here's the reason why this is a valid topic and why it was in my bad section. Because right now. And you can't argue against it with the placings. They are number 3 ranked in the world, guys. Like, understand, that means now when they play FaZe, Na'Vi, Vitality outside, they're supposed to be the favourite. Like, if you're number 3, trip over and give me a trophy eventually. Yeah, come on, you know what I mean? It can't always be second and top 4. Like, well, good run at second. We're number 3 now. Now we've got to go. Don't have to be number 1 in the world, but win me a trophy. Give me a trophy at least.
Yeah, that's basically why it feels weird with them right now, because it feels like they're not gonna. It just feels like they're not gonna win a trophy for some, like, because they've been in a bunch of finals now. I mean, or like
your point about the 7-map pool though is a valid one. Like, if they can keep making that work, that's an interesting angle. Because let's be real, almost no one tries that at the top level.
Yeah, it's really hard on him, but it's a way, you know. It's
props
one way
to
to get an edge.
He's the one who suggested that, by the way. I know no one ever brings his bloody name up because the joke is they talk like your kid is the IGL and coach. Like, spoiler, he isn't, but I think, as far as I can tell, by the way, look at when Daps came in this team. It's night and day, the difference. He must have done again, he must be doing something as a coach.
Yeah, I wish he just sold himself more, because like
every time I talk to him,
I talk to him, he's like it's almost like the reason he doesn't want to sell himself though is because he thinks like the mass populace's peon brains wouldn't understand what it is that he's bringing. Like, even though I'm sure he's bringing tactics or some style or like pacing that
he's the guy. I'll tell everyone. I've told this story before by the numbers. He's the guy where it's like you go out and you fight for them in public. It's a disgrace that he was fired. Like, you know what's going on, and then privately you say it, and then they're just like, yeah, but it's whatever. I don't really mind it. You're like, oh, what the hell? You're not even that mad about. Well, then why the fuck am I going out there fighting to the death? Now I only do that for Aleksib. I'm trying to defend all those fucking haters from the OG era. It's all right. I was like fucking Neo in the Matrix. I was blocking everything, dodging it all. I had it all. 2 guns behind me. They didn't even know about those deadly hidden ones. Right. What is your ugly point, Aleksi?
I mean, yeah, it doesn't come as a surprise, but I feel like it's a good topic to talk about because I feel like the more you talk about it, I mean, I guess in a way the more could be talked about it and the more changes would happen, like whatever. But it's just the fact that, like, I mean, the downfall of Finnish CS overall, but I feel like just the fact that, like, you nearly always had a Finnish team who was at least somewhere. So like you had these old teams with like Sunny, Alux, Arte, who was like maybe I don't know, like top 15, then 10, and then you had Rocket, and then you had, I mean, the ends that we were, and you usually had someone doing something, right?
Yes.
But now for like I don't know how long, we've not had that. We've been trying though. Like I know people have been trying, but like still, I mean, right now the good thing is, I think Havu got an invite to the closed qualifier of their RMR, so obviously ups their chances to maybe get into the RMR and start something, right? Like they just, pretty sure they just made a roster change or two, or they're doing, or at least something is happening. So maybe some kind of like air under the wings and something could happen, right? Like I think like the major was the like where we got known with ENS, right?
Yes.
So but I just feel like the reason I put it on the why it's ugly and whatever is just the fact that like no one could have predicted it, even when like I got kicked out of ENS. Just think like I thought, I'm not sure what you guys think, but I just think like you could have argued then that like holding on to 3 players or 4 players, changing one, like you could at least have a team who is like, I don't know, like playing something or doing something, or like ENS would have trusted these players, but now you see ENS with 0 Finnish players, just a Finnish coach. And by the way, I think So is doing like a remarkably good job as a coach, and I've heard some really good things. So I think, I mean, he could be the future coach of a good Finnish team if it ever comes up. But I'm just saying, like, something's going wrong, and I mean, it's just weird. It's super weird.
I guess I'll just comment on what I see in the current Havu lineup, and I imagine that Dodo's calling, because I know he took up the role for forgot what team. I mean, he might have just taken up for Havu straight up when he moved from ENS back to Havu. So I think he's probably still the leader there. But then you played with a bunch of these, or a couple of these guys, X7 and Ariel. I have a hard time even imagining how they're still competing at any, like, I don't know, when they were playing for your team, it always just felt like, I mean, they just felt like AUG abusers a lot of the time, or you guys just had really good strats. And so I know Ariel had that one MVP for that one Blast event, and he like really popped off. I think he was like using the A1S, and I just remember him nailing people because he was playing like back Ivy or something, like 6 train, and he was just destroying people then. But I mean, it's hard for me to like really. I mean, I don't know the inner workings of this scene, but I do like that they brought Banjo on, because Banjo from that Fnatic Rising roster, whatever, the Fnatic Academy team, he was like a really solid anchor piece. And I think he played for Fnatic in like,
I think he stood in for
also,
like when they had like some of the, maybe for the major qualifier or whatever that shit was ages ago when they had that.
He played
Alex.
EPL.
There we go.
He played EPL, and he had a 0.97 rating, and that's like his first jump up to tier 1. And it's like that's pretty respectable for a guy that's like just getting this call up, probably very suddenly, because I think it was some weird incident that he got called up for. But yeah, I mean, it's anytime a scene falls off like this, it is pretty disheartening. It just seems like certain regions in Counter-Strike are just having a really tough time keeping up, and I don't know if there's I mean, that's more or less my comment on it. It just kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
Yeah, go on. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I think the same thing happened with Swedish CS, right? Like I got a bit more familiar with it, like after joining NIP. But like, I mean, Finnish CS and Swedish CS at the current moment doesn't seem too good, right? Like, you would usually have a Finnish, at least a Swedish team at the top.
Oh, of course.
Now you don't have that. Then I mean, you could. Like at the one point at least, you could imagine that like you should have someone in the Finnish scene like playing at a top 15 team, or like a top 15 Finnish team and whatever. And I just want to bounce back on the previous one, like what you said about Ariel and X7. I just feel like sure, they're like when we played in ENS, like they weren't the youngest. Like I think Ariel is like what, 28 or 29, but I still fully, like, you can call me naive or whatever, but I fully believe if I had Ariel, X7, and maybe like Sergey's little brother, like Yimpat, if you know him.
Yep.
I'm just gonna say, like, I would believe that we would be a good team. Like, I don't think they fell off. I don't think they're orc abusers. I know these guys, and I know how they work. And when we were building ends, me and Alu, like not sure like how did it go, but we talked about it, me and him, like a lot. Like we even went to lengths on saying like we are not doing the project if we don't get Ariel, for example. And Ariel was still in, I don't know what team he was, but you needed to buy him out in Finland. And I remember saying like I'm not doing this, or I'm not exactly did I use those words, but there was some kind of like
ultimatum.
Ultimatum, yeah, exactly. It's to like, you need to have this guy, and we already knew, I think at that point, that X7 was coming, and X7 is just like, I mean, because we already spoke about it, it's like shoes to me. Exactly. Where like you can put him in these roles, like in Havu, I think he's taking more space now, and like because he has that experience that he's maybe playing different roles. But for me, this guy, he was always clutching, and you could always put him alone somewhere, and he's playing it well. And I feel like, I mean, Ariel, I mean, he was just the guy that, like, as you said, like beaming people, and you just give a gun into his hands, and he's good, and he's like the hardest worker I think we have in Finland. Like every time, still, I mean, like he's offline on Steam 24/7, by the way, offline. But then when you go to his profile, it's 130 hours every 2 weeks.
Right,
every
it's just hiding.
2 weeks.
Right.
Yes,
yeah.
every 2 weeks he does that, and it's just like they're still trying to pull it off, and like at least from what I've seen, and I think Chimpat, like I need to say it here just so that the name gets out there more. Like you will see Chimpat in a really good team at some point. Like
if people don't know, his problem was he was one of the people who had like the VAC ban in the past, like Yampi, so it meant he could never play. But that doesn't count now, right? He can actually play in theory.
In January this year, I think January this year, it reached 4 years, so that's when he can play.
So he's available now.
So like, if within 6 months he's not getting a chance to play on any good, like decent level team, like I don't know, like I could start a charity fund or something. Like
he's on Mauisnake C now.
Yes, and he's playing fucking well. Just telling you that, and he's good.
Oh, he's 16. Wow. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Damn.
Like he's just at the age when Sergey got picked up, and it's gonna happen.
Yes. A few things to say on that. So one, you nailed it, but at the end, but also you forgot the missing piece. I believe you. If you got Ariel and X7, I believe they'd be good players again. But you don't have them. That's the problem. The missing piece is you, mate. I know, because the joke, I've told you the story before. This happened to my mate Lurpus the whole time in 1.6. It's like all the other players, like they play their role, they play their game, they like CS, but none of them want to be the IGL, because the IGL's the role that sucks. You have to put in all these extra hours, think about all stuff other players don't care about. And so Lurpus had the same thing. If he was in the team, then all the pieces could come together, they could look really good. But then the joke is they even kicked him out of his own team at one point in time, because they just used to do a carousel of you kick this guy and then you kick the next one, you just keep going until the team changes. So I think that's already a problem, is they don't have an Aleksi. Like, look, there's no other big name for IGL like we're all talking about. We're just talking about the other players in ENCE. And then you look at the players and you think about this, right? You need your stars. Like in that team, you had Alu, you had Sergey. Ariel was a bit more in the middle, but he had his times. Well, you look at the stars. Alu, it was just ego. That's just sort of ruined his career, unfortunately. You look at Sergey, that I've heard a tiny bit of ego, but also the army obviously reset him. He's done. If people don't remember, he's only 20 now. Guys, he was in the HL team top 20 in 2019. Like, he should be doing, like, Monacy things that, well, not quite that high, but you know what I mean? This should be, like, his prime. He should be getting better and better and better and better. He should be, like, the fucking Finnish NiKo or something. By now, he'd be popping off. He'd be like Ropses now. He'd be, like, fucking in his prime. You'd be building a whole team around him. But sadly, he got reset, and then for whatever reason, wasted his time. That Gorillas project never went anywhere. And then Sonny did the same shit, didn't he? Sonny also was the guy where he's never fully come back, and then we had the online period, and he's had all the crap with his own trying to be in that team that didn't work. So all your big star names have gone, unfortunately. That's the reason why the rest are just left in Havu, and like you said, it's not even anymore like there's an Alu, like one player that can go elsewhere to a big team. So at the moment, the scene just looks like a mess. Like, I'm sure there's decent players, but when you're building a team, you need those pieces. You need your star player, you need your in-game leader, then you start putting pieces around them. They don't have those pieces right now. So that's why actually maybe you're right to hit the gym fat angle. If he can be the next one, if he's only 16 now, if in the next 1-2 years he's getting better and better and better, and we see he's rising, then maybe that's the play you can build a team around. You can finally get some pieces going.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, I made like a what is it called now, like interview, and I think Saw from ENS, like the coach, made an interview as well, that the Finnish scene just need more leaders.
Yes.
Because I feel like if you make a team and you're like, I don't want to be the leader, I don't want to be, fuck it, I'll be the leader just so we can work, right? Like that's not gonna work.
Yeah.
Or like if it works, it's a miracle kinda. Like it's gonna work to some extent, but then at some point someone is gonna be like, maybe we should try this guy as a leader. Like you need a leader, you need someone to trust in, and you just shut up about it. Like there's like, no chance this role is getting lifted to another player. Like this guy will be the leader. Like we don't have those pieces in Finland, and I think like just touching on the Swedish topic as well. Like when I remember the times, like you had Exist, you had Golden, like even though like you could argue like who was good and who was bad, but you had a leader.
Yes.
You had someone that people followed, and you had a team at the top of the HLTV boards. And like right now in Finland, for example, we don't have leaders, and it's like as soon as someone pops up, like I think there's gonna be hope in terms of like creating a new team. I feel like. But I mean, who knows? Like maybe Habu now, they'll show something in the RMR or get into the RMR, which I hope they do. But yeah, I mean, it's a mess, as you said, and yeah, I just hope that something comes up eventually.
I'll say one. I'll give one last thing that could maybe help any scenes like this is like I mean I kind of remember in 2016 when Fallen was coming up with the Luminosity team, how he was releasing all of this incredible YouTube content that was basically about like, here's all of our Mirage defaults, here's all of our setups, like, and then he went with like the ideas behind them, some strategies, and he would just upload these to YouTube. And what he was doing at that time was like he was actively competing, and while Luminosity were basically becoming the best team, they were kind of having their era at that point, and yet he was still giving so much back to anybody that wanted to listen. And I think that, Aleksi, you definitely released a good amount of YouTube content. I remember watching a good amount of it, of like smokes you had, like setups and things like that.
Yeah, but I mean, they're so basic that, I mean, you're not building a team, but I get the point, like doing something more advanced, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's like kind of like the dirty hard work that when you're already playing on a team and trying to make NIP as good as it can be, it's pretty hard to like sit down after practice and say, I'm going to record setups for 2 hours, you know, like exactly. That's where Fallen went above and beyond and became the godfather of Brazilian CS on top of just achieving what he did in the game. Like that's where it seems like some of this needs to come from, but it's just so tough nowadays because people get so demotivated so quickly with like releasing content like that. If it's not a hit right away, it's hard to like stay with it.
Yeah. Also, I'll do that thing where, as a total naive outsider, I just make ignorant comments about another country and culture I don't truly understand. So pretty on brand for me, if you've been following my career. What I'll say is this. The problem is this, Maui. You don't know because you know Aleksib, you know like Alu, like these people are pretty like fucking intense, you know, like they do want to compete and be the best. A lot of Finnish players, and I've seen this throughout all of CS, a lot of them, if you just leave them to their own, as you say, devices, like just leave them to do what they want, they just play sort of for fun. Like the joke is they'll still be playing the game, but they'll just play like a bunch of pickups. They unironically will just drink a few beers while they're doing it. They have a famous like low alcohol level beer that they all fucking drink that you can buy at the supermarket. You don't have to go to the government store for that one. They just drink a few of those. You play. Back in the day, it used to be clan based, but now it'll just be a pickup or FPL, I'm sure, or FaZe at night. They'll be playing a bunch of those games, and it's more like they're actually not like playing up to their skill. They're not trying to be super pros. Some of them are just sort of cool with being like, I'm just good at the game, and like I play like semi-pro. I feel like that's one thing that's maybe missing is there's not more people. That's why to me you've got to have an Alan, you've got to have an Aleksib, you've got to have people who drive those people, you know.
The one thing that was like scarier than seeing like an all Eastern European stack in a FaZe game against us, I remember once I first like moved here to Europe and started playing with like a bunch of the other talent and stuff like that, is seeing a 5-man Finnish stack on like Nuke. It just felt like they're gonna just run through, like they're just gonna run at you in ways that it's just so uncoordinated, but also like they just know the bare minimum amount of smokes and flashes that it's like just a pain in the ass to actually have to deal with that stuff. Yeah, just. I'm sure that's what a lot of the scene feels like. All right, I can get into my ugly point though.
No, wait, I want to see. Was that totally off base there, Aleksib? Was that ignorant? What do you think?
I think like a lot what you said. Like I mean, I can also relate to not in terms of like having a couple beers and playing for fun, but I mean, I can relate to like seeing happening around me and like to other people. It's like, I think you put it really well. Like, for example, Sergey, he was just playing because it was fun.
Right.
Like, the reason he's not playing right now is just doesn't have any motivation. Like, there was no other reason, like, why he couldn't, like, postpone his army or, like, whatever these things are. It's just, like, the fact that, like, he didn't find it funny, and then he just stopped. Whereas there could be a lot of different people or a lot of different cultures. It's like, they're thinking it in a way like, okay, this is my chance, and even though it feels shitty at times, like, I'll do the most out of it, right?
Yes.
Like, so in that aspect, I just think you hit the nail in the coffin there.
There you go. Right, Maui, your ugly point is also right in the vein of, I described that process earlier. It's like, oh, it's a great moment. Like, can we get the congratulations? He's like, you suck at this. Yeah. So come on, hit me with it.
Yeah. It's just that it feels like we've hit heroic skill ceiling. I think we've seen the best that we're going to get out of this heroic lineup. They could make a change or whatever, but it just feels like, in terms of individual ability, it seemed like the hardest thing, we've talked about this before on like analyst segments, is just like, how are you going to get 10% more out of a player? And I feel like you're maxing out on everybody on this team. You basically had a career tournament for Yabby, and they still fell short. Cadian is still playing pretty well as an opper. Like, sure, maybe a little overrated by the community, but like, still like doing a very serviceable job. Like, he's doing better than like OC, for example, you know? So like he's definitely fulfilling his role. Stown probably is the guy that went missing the most in this tournament for me, but everybody else is just like Tessus did pretty darn well. Like, he was one of the reasons, one of the series, maybe like their semi-series or something, is like one of the reasons they made it through. He looked fantastic. So with Heroic, it feels like they've pushed teamwork as far as it can go. Like, we love with CS that teamwork can make make you punch above your weight in terms of individuals, but I don't think that it's easy to see a route for Heroic to get that much better. And that's my ugly point with this whole thing, is that I just think that they're capped now, and they're going to be they should be a team that just continues to fight their way deep into these playoffs. And you know what? I think they could win like one trophy this year. I think they definitely could snag one, but they're not like, assuming that they're ever going to have any sort of era of dominance seems so far beyond their capabilities. And I just think that's like, this is what we're getting from Heroic is what we are set to get from Heroic for this foreseeable future.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, I didn't think about it in a way, but I feel like when you said like almost maxed out every player, and just the fact that Yabi played like such a good tournament as well. I mean, it's kind of right. Like, it's just that the way they play CS, it's like, I mean, you don't have one player shining. It's like the whole unit shining if they're playing well. And I feel like, I mean, obviously, Yabi was like, if they won, he would have been the MVP, and I don't think anyone like would have guessed that he would be the MVP like prior to the tournament. But all I'm saying is, I think like as a team, they will shine, and yeah, I mean, you might not see them play better, but I feel like just because of their style and whatever, and just the fact that like they could claw out a win against anyone, but then at the same time, I mean, on the major they lost to outsiders who I just thought that Heroic is winning the major. I told everyone like Heroic is gonna win this major, and I think a lot of teams like players agreed. But I mean, they ended up losing, right? And then they won against G2. And now they lost against G2, and against these really like high quality, like you don't see them really lose against worst opponents that often. Like they nail those games pretty much every time. But then against the elite teams, they might be winning, they might be struggling. But I guess at the same time, like that's also why I think they will be like this year. They're still gonna be contending for a lot of titles, like at least a lot of semifinals. Even there could be a lot more finals, like who knows? But like how many titles they're gonna get this year, I don't know. But all I'm saying is, I just think like if they don't overthink it that much and they keep like playing the style they're doing, and if let's say next tournament Staven picks it up, or I don't know, Kadeng is playing his mind out, like they're gonna be there for a long while if they keep doing what they're doing. But I mean, I don't know all the details. Like maybe there's something going on, and maybe they want to change player in 2 months. Like I don't know. But it's just, I mean, well said in a way that I think they're maxing out a lot of their players, because I just feel like the cohesion is so good. But yeah, at the same time, I mean, G2 can just come and bang you out if they're playing that well. So it is hard.
Yeah, the problem is, like, I definitely agree. Like one thing I'll say, I'll pick up on a point you said earlier, which is because of how amazing that style is, like that they all like act like the hive mind almost. They actually do remind me of like old school Astralis in that sense. Like they're always on the same page, all the rotations are together, the comms look like they're fucking sick, you're preempting people's rotations on the T side, etc. The problem with that is it also means it's not as simple to just be like, right, cut this guy and bring this guy. It's like, who the fuck knows what that does to that dynamic? Like the whole chemistry could shift. Maybe now a bomb site doesn't make sense. Like a lot of these things, that the edges that they get out of the team shift up. So you're taking a big gamble if you do that. And if you're going to gamble at the level they're at, where you're like right there to win all the tournaments, it has to actually be like device, play MF. Yeah. Even Config's like probably a bit on the body, you know, like it has to be a massive heavy hitter where he's just so good. We've got to try this lap. So at the moment, they haven't been in that position. Like the Yabby move obviously has turned out actually pretty good. People thought maybe that's a side gets look like it's getting better and better and better. But I agree with you, Maui. If he can post those numbers and you don't win the tournaments, like, what are you hoping's coming down the pike, as you're saying? It's like that's the best case scenario. If people don't know, he had, for the whole of Katowice, remember he's in the grand final, guys, he had a 0.79 kills per round. Like, that's like fucking actual prime NiKo shit. Like, you're not going to get that every tournament. And if you're not, suddenly you're probably going to lose a semis match or whatever. The problem I have basically is I'm with Aleksib as well. Like, I don't totally give up hope. Like, the joke is every game they play, I actually see how suddenly they can win this. Like, in the final, if people don't know, the reason why it must be so soul-crushing to lose the final like that is, not only did they lose, like, every fucking pistol round, they were still leading in all the first halves. Like, every first half, they'd be up, like, 6-1, 6-2. And then they'd always be on that round. And this is where, unfortunately, I think you do have to... I know players and coaches and in-game leaders hate to hear this because they think it's, like, it plays too much into fanboys, thinking, like, it's just, like, Simple and fuck everyone else. But the problem is, Aleksi, when you have someone like Simple, they can even win the round you're not supposed to win. So when you're on that, like, clutch round, there's a saying they used to have in basketball, which is, it's not that, like, the great player always scores the basket or always scores the most points, but it's like right in the middle of the game when it can go to shit and you really need a basket, the great player can just go like, give me the ball, and he can just do it. He can just make it happen. So the problem they have is they don't have that player. That's the issue, you know. Like, there are rounds, people know this, like, Vitality would lose fucking 1 billion games if they didn't have Zero. He steals rounds for you, or he gets into a situation where you're down in number and then he just kills 2 people until it's right back to even. Their problem is, like, the team style's awesome. So I always describe their team like this. It's like walking on a tightrope. If they do it perfectly, they could do it. They could win all these tournaments. But if you fall once, you're fucking dead in this analogy, you know. Their problem is the superstar player, the like top 5 player, that's like the safety net. That's the player that if I'm falling, he could catch me, as it were. I'm making this analogy fucking mental at this point. Does it make sense? But you get the premise of, like, they haven't got anyone to save them, basically. They've got that style. If it works, it works. If it doesn't...
Yeah. It's like, for example, the way they lost Mirage to G2, like, they called a great T side, but on the CT side, they fell apart. And I'd say the reason is because of the CT calling, actually, because they kept fighting mid versus G2 over and over again, and they kept dying. Like, they kept taking 2 casualties. Sometimes they just basically lose the whole round with a mid fight. And that's when you kind of hope that a star player is going to bail you out. Like, that probably ended up, I mean... I'll just say, objectively, that ended up being the wrong call. They needed to stop fighting mid against G2. They're just getting destroyed by them over and over again. Like, take B apps, like, play some kind of, like, retakes, like, 1-1-3 or something like that. Like, do something, like, push into A ramp, push into Palace, do something different. But, like, when Cadian isn't calling a perfect game, they're just not going to win. And that's the thing where it's like, for them to basically win a trophy, and I think they can win a trophy this year. Like, I'm definitely not counting them out of doing that. But it's just that Cadian needs to call so well because, like you're saying, there's no bailout player. Like, if he makes the wrong call, like, Tessus isn't going to kill 3 people swinging off of Cat or whatever it needs, or Stown or whoever it is there. You know, like, it's just like, if there were, like, you remember when Skybox had, like, round prediction, like, in the middle of a round on Blast, like, that thing is probably perfectly accurate when Heroic's in the server, like, based off of positioning, based off of utility, numbers, like, that thing is always going to nail Heroic, but teams like G2, it's going to be wrong a lot of the time on.
Yes. What do you think, Aleksi?
I mean, I just remember this, like when you said about something about the good players that are gonna like claw you around win that you shouldn't win. I just remember I thought it was against Heroic, but it wasn't. But it was just a good example of Vitality versus I think it was Liquid on Nuke when Zywu won that 1-on-4 with an AK.
Okay.
Well, I'm not sure was it that game even, but anyways, like he won that 1-on-4, like I mean just a Zywu round, right? And he made it look so easy, just with an AK, by the way, not with an op, just with an AK, just killing everyone. And then Apex like standing up and screaming, "He's too good for you," or something like that. So it's just like this, like these details. It's like, as you said, I feel like you are right in a way that they don't really have that player, which, by the way, I think makes it even more impressive.
Yeah, of course.
But,
yeah.
But just the fact that, yeah, I think you're.
It was against Fnatic. That was the one where
Fnatic,
he did a 1v4 clutch after the bomb was down.
Yeah, Fnatic.
Oh, yeah.
You're right. That was the round.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's just, I mean, it's a weird situation for them, and yeah, but I mean, I feel like we talked about a lot of the things revolving around that, and I just think,
yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, I mean, they're still gonna do well in my books, but you just have to wait and see.
Yes. Yeah, the one thing I would say is this. If you were to put one of those odds, because they also love to do it on the NFL, by the way, Maui, like the odds are like still winning the game. If like, because you know, in like the last 3 minutes, like I should even watch the game basically, or is it over? Right? If you were to do this, like back me up on this, Aleksi B. If you were to put the stats for a team that on the first half of Mirage is up like 8-1 on T side, like what the odds of they win the Mirage game? It'd be insane. It'd be like fucking, what's like 95%, I'd imagine. Like if you're up 8-1 on T side, like that's already enough T rounds, like, but fucking they still lost that map. That's the ultimate example, because I even wonder on that one if that's why they made all those mad CT players. They were just like horny to have the win, like you see it slipping away from yourself. So I don't know. And by the way, G2 is probably the worst team to do that against. They always just fucking come back right now. I don't think so. All the fraggers, right?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, go on.
If they were leading against any other team 8-1, I just think it's game over. But like G2 right now, it just seems like if they start strong, like they'll finish it. If they start slow, like they'll come back, and like I watched maybe 2 games where they did in the same fashion. Like you would think that, oh, here is where the streak ends.
Yep.
And it just doesn't, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, yeah, but to be honest, like, sure, I'm not sure what it was exactly like about Maui saying like them fighting mid and whatever. But then when I watched like some of the rounds, it's like, you know, Monesi being up cat, killing the con guy with his smoke out or something at like 1 minute 30. Yeah. Then he's going to the short guy. Short guy is panicking like, holy shit, my con guy just got owned. And he's killing him mid-air. It's like, also, they played it so good individually at some points. But obviously, I think, yes, in hindsight, they should have adapted after. But, I mean, G2 played well.
No, if you ever see, I mean, you'll know it's Maui. Like, if you ever see when I do one of those, like, live desks where I'm, like, sort of live casting the game / one thing I always try to do for fans, because I think it's the most misunderstood part of the game, they never bloody do it on the broadcast. Like, if Launders, could you wake the fuck up, mate? You should know this stuff. When you're watching the game, you have to explain the scoreline to a fan. What you have to explain is, right, it doesn't matter that, like, in this case, right, you know, so I'll give you an example. If I was explaining that Mirage game, when it's 8-1, I'm going to be explaining it like that. Like, right, Heroic is in a crazy driver's seat now. Not only can they do like anything they want on the rest of the T side, because they're just playing like for rounds that are like bonuses if they get them, but then on CT side as well, essentially, like if you have half decent read, you just stay in the sights and win the rounds. You make them like test you. If you know that, right, then I would flip though, because the thing G2 always did was when they would come back, it'd be like the old FaZe comebacks. They just come back in a row. They just win like 8 rounds in a row. So then suddenly you'd be on the second side. Look, I know I just told you guys they had more than enough T rounds, but suddenly actually to be at like, you know, 12-12 or something, now that it's like 50-50, like suddenly the lead's gone. It's not like you have to understand the side. So that's the other thing about like the G2 one. Like that, it's also so unfair because they are just flipping all the dynamics. Like they do sometimes have, like not win enough rounds on the first half and then just win like 10 in a row. So like you can't. The spoiler is you can't do anything against that. So my last one, it's the last point of the whole show. It's an ugly one. I very carefully picked it for this category because this will sound so fucked up to people. They'll be like, what? Right? Obviously, we're all loving the fact that NiKo just won what I call a prestige event, because I think it's a new term we need. Prestige event to me, Aleksi, it's the majors and Katowice and Cologne. Because if you look at people's careers, at least right now, like Blast hasn't done it yet. They haven't got that tournament like a Cologne and Katowice. Like, these are the tournaments. Like, I believe Modesty when he says that he lost last year and he was thinking all year, I've got to win this tournament. Because that's what Katowice means to people. Cologne's also a big deal. The majors, these are the ones you want to win in your career. And obviously, your famous detailers, even though almost everyone would have NiKo in their top 10 players of all time. The joke is we'd have him probably even over people like Cold Zero who've won majors and all the MVP. He's the only one that had 0 of those fucking tournaments. And he'd been in loads of finals as well. And I'll add this as well. It's not like he was in the finals when he's in mouse spots, guys. He was in the final in teams that were the favourite, that were 50-50. Like, he was almost never like the big underdog. Like, but he never ever got it through. So the reason I put this in the ugly one is because on the one hand, I want to go, brilliant, you won one. But there's 2 things. One, if you won any of those past ones, you'd also have been the MVP, and that's why it would build into like you are the great. You know, it is you. You know, if you'd have chatted up instead of simple, you'd be the greatest ever. I can't say that because spoiler, it wasn't even close to the MVP of this one. Like the joke is, I had JKS because I just thought like from his position, it's unreal he did that fragging. I get why people picked Hunter though. That was also a mega pick. Like. On this one, he didn't get carried, let's be real. G2's a super team. But it also didn't have to be like NiKo of old. And then crucially for me, I'm sorry, this is one where it's like, congrats on getting that win, but like, the fuck took you so long? Like I said in that tweet, dude, when he first joined FaZe, if people remember the story, like, oh, he was trapped in mouse. He joined FaZe a week later. They were in that final at Katowice against the old Kiebi version of Astralis, and they lost. But because they'd only had a week practice, everyone was like, oh, you guys better get ready. Because when they've had practice with NiKo, we're coming for all the trophies. And the joke is, it took 6 years to win one of these motherfuckers. Like, it's actually crazy to me because, again, he is inarguably one of the absolute best players I've ever seen with my eyes in the game. His stats even do bear out. Like his worst year would again be like the best year for like the 10th best player of that year. Like he's one of those superhuman players. But the idea it took until 2023 to win one of these, it's so crazy to me. Like I almost can't believe it now. Like it doesn't make sense when I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know about it till you said.
Isn't that wild? Because the thing, I always tell people, he has won trophies. Like, if you go look, he's won like, I don't know, 10, 12, but they're always like Star Series or some fucking Blast or DreamHack, whatever. Like, the problem is it was never the ones that really count. And let's be real, if you just look at his face and all the losses, he definitely cared about winning those trophies. That's one thing I'll never take away from NiKo. I believe he really wants to win and has the whole time.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, some of the tournaments that he was winning, like the New Yorks and the epicenters and things like that, they felt pretty big at the time. I think now we've kind of consolidated what we actually consider to be the prestige ones, and I agree with it. I agree with those 4, like 4 per year. I think it's like also a nice number to just kind of say like it's like a quarterly tournament.
Yeah, exactly.
But I would like the pushback I have is like I feel like his that New York win was pretty damn sick, and also just epicenter in general. Like was it like BO5 versus was it BO5 versus like Navi or
I think they 2-0'd. I think it was just a BO3.
Oh, it was just a BO3 then. Okay. Well, that's a little bit different actually now that you mentioned
the
that.
point is though, like again to add on to it, he had that problem like the old Astralis did when they used to choke. They used to beat all the same teams in the next tournament. It's just they wouldn't do it at the major. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so as you're saying, if anything, it builds smart in my case. Like he's beat all these teams. He's even beaten Astralis and people don't know. He has beaten Prime Astralis more than almost any other player if people don't know that. Just he never did it at the fucking major, unfortunately, or at the big Katowice type tournament.
Yeah. I remember those games. I remember when FaZe would just like Astralis would do everything right in the round, and then someone from FaZe would just peek and take map control back because they'd win a fight. Yeah. It's just like it was so silly. But yeah, like with NiKo's legacy, it's great to see him win one of these trophies because like I mean we saw the emotions on his face when he was like the picture of him holding the trophy is probably like the most iconic image of this entire event, and he wasn't even MVP, and you know like and they were the favorites winning that grand final, you know, like all of this worked together, and I think like something that makes me believe in the script writers of CS or like that this is all like it's just like we got Simple with his trophy, we got Kerrigan with his major.
Right, it's the order of them, right?
Yeah, it's like okay, is it time for NiKo's trophy? Is it time for NiKo's major? Because all this then like
we're talking about Aleksi B 2024 Katowice, the script. You know, you got just the people who've been in the finals but they don't win. Just continue it. He's next in line. You know.
Yeah. So just so people know, it's all scripted.
Yeah, it is. Of course. And by the way, this is how you know what a harsh career he's had. Because by the way, in the same way as we're talking about when things go great, the confidence, it fucks with your head even if you're NiKo, if you lose all those times. Like, it doesn't matter how confident you are, it definitely gets you. All you need to know is this. Like I said, watch his face in that final. Remember, the way they're playing, I would think I can't lose. Like, we just win every pistol, we always come back. Like, but if you watch right up until the very end, there's a reason why him and Hunter, their comments in the interviews are like, well, I'm really glad I didn't go to a fifth. Not like, you know what, I still thought they could win. Like, because these guys have just experienced, they've been in war so long, guys. They've experienced so many fucked up scenarios until the actual trophy was handed to them. I bet they still didn't think they'd won. They were like, I'm sure there's not like a secret overtime where they can still deny me. Like, that's all. You could just see in their faces the fucking shit they've been through.
I mean, I've been there as well, and I feel like it is completely 100% true, because I remember, like, for example, this loss we had against FaZe, when we just created G2 and played Katowice, and then we played against FaZe, and we lost. Was the first map Inferno or what? Like, we had a huge lead or whatever, and then I
know the second one was the insane like 5 OT one or whatever.
Yeah, like Rob's did the insane round on Inferno that which I thought was the best.
It's play of the year, probably, wasn't it?
Yeah, play of the year, and like after that map. Like, I'm not saying that anyone gave up or anything, but you could just, I feel like you could feel that, you know, they must have been like, is it really happening? And again, like, especially NiKo, for example. But I mean, obviously, like, I'm not saying that it affected him or anything, but you could see, like, you could sense the feeling that like, this wasn't new, and we were like, we need to dig ourselves out of it, you know?
Yes.
Like, that this has happened again previously. I mean, it obviously happened to me again, as well on another Katowice, but I mean, here I really thought that we were in the driving seat, like playing against a FaZe with a stand-in, whereas in the previous Katowice it was against the Astralis that couldn't be beaten almost.
Yes.
So it's a bit of a different aspect, but I feel like I could imagine NiKo's shoes, like being at the Katowice final, like against a team with a stand-in. And then you throw that lead on the first map or whatever it was. Like, I think everyone would have felt the same way.
Put it this way, I once heard like a great anecdote that supposedly one of the reasons why Muhammad Ali was like considered like the greatest fighter ever is because even some of his rivals that were obviously just as good, like boxing wise and with world champion himself, they said he would do shit like in the fight. You would hit him with like an amazing shot, like a hook right to the chest, like the body or something, which by the way hurts everyone. Like, there's no, if you didn't defend it, you just get hit in the fucking like liver or something. And when you would hit him, he would just intentionally like smile and be like, "Is that all you got?" And even though in your mind, you must know on some level, like, I definitely landed there. Like, that fucks with you, because then you think, you're like, if that doesn't put him down, then what is? Like, that's the vibe, like you're saying, when you get like a map taken away that you were leading in, you think, oh, this is our map, maybe seeing your map pick. If you lose in that way, it's not that you give up, but you just think like, fuck, if I can't win when that happens, what am I supposed to do with the rest of the game? Like, they took my best shot, as it were. So I don't blame him. But it was hilarious, all those interviews, like I said. Like, because normally you do the opposite, don't you? Like, normally when you win, you do the other way. You're supposed to just go, like, you know what? Well, actually, we felt sort of bad for the scene that we were just beating everyone in nowhere. So we just gave him a map. We thought, you know what? Have a map. You earned it. You know what, Heroic? You've earned it with you playing the rest of the tournament. But obviously, we couldn't let you win. I wasn't going to let you win, though. I'd just do it like that. But again, I've always said, just hit me up. I'll give you the shit-talking lines. Listen, we can arrange it. It's private. I can help you out.
That's why it's good when Simple wins, because he just talks mad shit.
Well, the joke is now he loses, he just talks shit on his own team, isn't he? I know he just goes, right, you know what, I'm really disappointed in why all you guys made me play bad in that match. You, get the fuck out. You, I'll kick you in 3 months. It's mental, isn't it? Like me, he's gone so out of control on all that shit. Every time, like the second they lose, the interview headline's just like, all I'm saying is some players are fucking up in this game, right? Not me, but some players. I don't want to say who. You know, some young players from Ukraine. But it's so obvious who he's talking about every time as well. And it's like, so SD, why isn't even here anymore, mate?
Yeah. There was a translated article in, I mean, I don't want to say the wrong, like Russian or Ukrainian, and like literally, he just named the players.
Oh, brilliant. There you go.
And so it's just translated. Anyway.
Whatever. Yeah. It's whatever, innit? I know. But that's why, that's the problem. I hate when people have that bad attitude. Right. Is that it? Is there any final thoughts on what was the last topic we just did? It was just about NiKo winning the Prestige event. Oh, here's the obvious thing to say is, bear in mind, D2's the obvious #1 team. Just like Carrigan last year, I've always said this. Remember, I have the other theory as well, Maui, that goes like this. The mistake people make is they think that, like, oh, you'll never catch up to his trials. It's like, you do, though. When you win, it's binary. You either win or you don't. And if you don't, it's nothing. And if you win, it's everything. So just like Carrigan last year, where all of a sudden, he'd never won then he won Katowice, the major, Cologne. It's like, guess what, NiKo? Fuck all what happened in the rest of the years. All those 6 years, forget them, mate. If you do it now, this year, if you play a top 3, top 5 player in the world, you are going to win all those trophies. You can win both majors. You can win all these. By the way, just do like Carrigan. You could actually do what he didn't and win all 4 of the fucking prestige events. If you do that in 1 year, the rest of them could suck your dick. Most people haven't won 4 prestige events. I know it's whack because you could have won like 7. Just get 4 now and you won't mind, to some degree. Probably still whine if I had to guess, but you know, whatever. I can't do more than that. All I can do is give you the trophy, motherfucker. As JKS probably said to NiKo after that one.